Chapter 22. Lu Yutong originally thought that she could only break through to gushing spring tier at the age of 19, or even 20. This speed was already very fast. Looking at the history of Rain Country, there were very few who could compare to her, but now she could complete this step at the age of 18. Not to mention 2 years faster. How old was she? At this age, advancing by a few months was already a shocking achievement, not to mention advancing by 2 years. This was all because of Ling Han. However, compared to Ling Han's own speed of advancement, it was not even worth mentioning. From the second layer of body refining tier to the fourth layer, 1 night. From the fourth layer of body refining tier to the fifth layer, 1 night. From the fifth layer of body refining tier to the sixth layer, 2 nights. Other people's advancement in tier was measured in months, or even years, but he was measured in days. Too monstrous. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "This speed is actually not that fast. Some beasts are born in the poly tier, or even in the gushing spring tier. They are the ones who are truly blessed by heaven and earth." There's actually such a beast? Lu Yutong instantly widened her beautiful eyes. There was actually a beast that was born stronger than her now? Naturally. Ling Han nodded, paused, and said, "I've read ancient records that some extinct beasts were born in the heaven tier, invincible." Lu Yutong did not believe him and said, "Since they were born in the heaven tier, then how could they become extinct? Heaven and earth naturally have their own rules. Who can fight against time itself?" Ling Han shook his head. In his last life, he did not want to turn into grass, so he resolutely stepped on the dangerous path to find a way to break through to the shattering void tier. There are too many mysteries in this world that can easily erase the existence of heaven tier. In his last life as a powerful warrior of heaven tier, there were many places that he did not dare to venture too deeply, as he could easily die. After 2 days of hard cultivation, Ling Han achieved another breakthrough, completing the accumulation of the 5th layer of body refining tier, and then advanced to the 6th layer of body refining tier without any difficulty. Because he had already walked this path in his previous life, comprehension of realms was actually the least of his concerns. However, advancing from the 6th layer of body refining tier to the 7th layer is a small leap. 3 days is not even enough. I need 4 or even 5 days. Ling Han sighed. Then I'll just have to train hard for another 4 or 5 days. On the side, listening to Ling Han's complaints, Lu Yutong had the urge to go crazy. What a monster! 1 day later, Ling Han reached the early stages of the 6th layer of body refining tier. 2 days later, he was already in the middle stages of the 6th layer of body refining tier. 3 days later, he reached the late stages of the 6th layer of body refining tier. 4 days later, he reached the peak of the 6th layer of body refining tier. Without delaying it to the 5th day, Ling Han began his breakthrough. In less than an hour, he had already stepped into the 7th layer of body refining tier. Reaching the 7th layer of body refining tier at the age of 16, this kind of cultivation level could be considered not bad anywhere in Rain Country. Moreover, if one added another condition to go from the 2nd layer of body refining tier to the 7th layer of body refining tier in just 8 days, no one would believe it. As a result, even Lu Yutong, a witness, had a dazed expression on her face. Her spirit had left her body, and she walked as if she was floating. She was really frightened. I can finally go out. Ling Han stretched lazily. As his body became younger, so did his spirit. After being cooped up in his room for 7 days, he felt like a tiger that had been trapped. "Fuck, father, the Chung family should have made their move," he mumbled. It was quite a coincidence. Although Ling Dongxing had been so busy for the past few days that his shadow could not be seen, he was actually sitting in the study today. However, he was obviously in a very bad mood, and his thick brows were furrowed into a Z shape. "Father, has the Chung family made their move?" Ling Han asked directly. Ling Dongxing did not raise his head, but only nodded. He held a brush in his hand and continued to write something. "Is the situation very bad?" Ling Han asked again. Ling Dongxing sighed and finally put down the brush. He said, "Very bad. Although our Ling family has countless businesses, there are only 2 that make the most money. The first is the mine and the second is the medicine shop." Ling Han knew that the Ling family had a red copper mine that they had obtained over 30 years ago. At that time, in order to fight for the ownership of this mine, the Ling family had paid an extremely high price, and many powerful martial artists had died. As for the medicine shop, they would purchase low-level alchemical pills from Tianyi and then sell them at a slightly higher price. Although this was just a reselling business because the demand for alchemical pills was very huge, a small profit but quick turnover was also a terrifying income. However, the life of the medicine shop was in the hands of Tianyi, but Tianyi also wanted to build a good relationship with the local tyrant, so each of the two big families in the city could get some alchemical pills to sell. Since 5 days ago, our mine has been attacked by unknown people, and many people have died. Now everyone is in a panic, and even if the wages have been raised, not many people are willing to go to the mine. Ling Dongxing continued, and Medicine Master Zhu from Tianyi suddenly made things difficult, saying that the alchemical pills sent from the headquarters this time were delayed on the way, and have not been delivered. Now the stock has been sold out, and if there are no more alchemical pills, the medicine shop will have to close temporarily. And this closure would be a blow to the reputation of the medicine shop. Even if it reopened in the future, it would definitely lose some customers. These 2 days, the funds have been a little tight, and we have to solve it as soon as possible. Ling Dongxing sighed. Although the Ling family had a big business, their expenses were also high. There was a saying that went, the poor study, the rich learn martial arts, and cultivation was a huge expense. Now that the two main industries of the Ling family were attacked at the same time, it immediately made the funds become tight, and if this went on for a long time, something big would happen, and they might be forced to sell some of the less important industries. The Chung family is behind this. Ling Han immediately said with certainty. Ling Dongxing nodded. There was no such coincidence in the world that two main industries encountered problems at the same time. He tapped his finger on the table and said, "There is also a mole." Ling Han immediately looked cold and said, "Ling Chong." That's right. There was naturally nothing to hide in front of his son, and Ling Dongxing snorted. As soon as the mine was in trouble, I sent more people to patrol, but not even the shadow of the other party was found. If someone hadn't leaked the patrol route, how could it have been done? It was likely that after Ling Chongquan learned that the Chang Xiang brother had been beaten up, he secretly went to see Chang Wenkuan and reached some kind of agreement with the other party. It was most likely to let the Chang family help him seize the position of the head of the family. As for whether he had signed more humiliating treaties, only he himself knew. Today I have an appointment with alchemist Zhu from Tianyi for a meal, so I have to give him some benefits. Otherwise, the family will really encounter a big problem, Ling Dongxing said. Zhu Yaoshi Zhu Daju and Ling Han's expression couldn't help but become strange, and he said, "I'll go with father. Your current task is to concentrate on your cultivation, and not until you have reached the 7th level of body refining realm Pu." Ling Dongxing looked directly at Ling Han, and the result was not that bad, but this instantly caused him to spit out, and his face was completely blank. If Lu Yutong was here, she would definitely be greatly relieved. He couldn't always let her be the only one shocked. Chapter 23. The timing of this strike was ingenious. It was the moment when the miasma cloud beast had just neutralized the encirclement of Lu Dong and the other three, and its defense was at its weakest. Swoosh, the long sword slashed across like a flying immortal. With a piu sound, the sword directly pierced through the miasma cloud beast's right eye, all the way to the hilt. Pong, the miasma cloud beast fell heavily onto the ground. It had actually died from a single strike. What? Mother? His? Lu Dong and the other three, including Zhu Shui who was hiding at the side, all gasped in astonishment. That was the miasma cloud beast, a top-notch existence among the body refinement tier demonic beasts. Yet, it had actually been killed with a single strike. How could they accept this? But immediately they all broke into a run. As they spoke, they would naturally inhale. They had all swallowed some of the poisonous miasma, and they had to circulate their energy to neutralize it immediately. Otherwise, their internal organs could possibly be corroded. After a while, Lu Dong was the first to walk over. He clapped a hand on Ling Han's shoulder, and said, "I had thought that you, brat, were so scared that you wouldn't dare to make a move. So you're actually so powerful. Your first move was so swift and fierce. Aha, brother Ling is really powerful." He actually killed the miasma cloud beast with a single strike, Li Hao also said. As a saber user, being able to admire such a clean and precise strike, he was also extremely excited. Ling Han only smiled. The lower one's cultivation level was, the easier it was for one to challenge those of a higher cultivation level. Moreover, the miasma cloud beast had been mostly distracted by Lu Dong and the other three, which was why he had the chance to kill it with a single strike. Otherwise, if it was a one-on-one battle, Ling Han would definitely not be a match for the miasma cloud beast, unless he had taken the antidote to the miasma poison beforehand. When the miasma poison had dissipated, they picked the green spiritual fruits one by one, but did not touch their roots. Their previous plan was that they were pressed for time, so they could only uproot the green spiritual fruits. Now that the miasma cloud beast was dead, there was naturally no need for them to do that. After all, this was a natural spiritual medicine, so it was a violation of the natural order. There were 7 green spiritual fruits, and there was exactly one for each of them. However, although Lu Yutong had put them away, she would definitely hand them over to Ling Han the moment she turned around. "Hung, all of you, put down the spiritual fruits." A cold voice rang out, and 2 men walked over, one after the other. It just so happened that they were an old man and a young man. The younger one was only in his 20s while the older one was already in his 70s or 80s, his hair completely white. The one who had spoken was precisely the young man. He was actually walking in front, and the old man was following behind him like a servant. Ling Han's gaze swept over them. With his divine sense of heaven tier, he was naturally able to tell with a single glance that this young man was in the 9th layer of body refining tier, while the old man was in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. "Who are you acting so cocky?" Lu Dong immediately stood up and shouted at the young man. The young man's gaze swept over Zhu Shuiyi's delicate figure and pretty face, revealing a hint of desire. Then he said disdainfully, "You don't even recognize me, Hang Zhan? Then you must have heard of Stone Wolf Sect, right? I am the eldest grandson of the 7th elder of Stone Wolf Sect." Stone Wolf Sect. When they heard these 3 words, the expressions of Lu Dong and the others changed at the same time, revealing a deep fear. In Rain Country, one could not casually call a sect. Sect, faction, society, gang. These were the 4 levels. Only a force that had a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier could be called a sect, a force that had a powerful warrior of gushing spring tier could be called a sect, and so on and so forth. A force that only had a warrior of element gathering tier in command could only be called a society, and a gang was the lowest level. Stone Wolf Sect was the strongest force in the surrounding area of 1,000 miles. It was said that the 9 great elders of the sect were all powerful warriors of gushing spring tier, and the sect master was even at the peak of the 9th layer of gushing spring tier. If what this Hang Zhan said was true, and his grandfather was really the 7th elder of Stone Wolf Sect, then his background was indeed terrifying. "Ha ha ha, now you know who I am. Put down the spiritual fruits, and each of you cut off one of your own arms. Then you can get lost. However, these 2 girls have to stay." Hang Zhan then cast a glance at Lu Yutong. Although he could not see her appearance, her graceful figure still caused his heart to beat faster. Based on his experience with countless women, this girl was definitely a beauty. Lu Dong and the others were all furious. Leaving behind the spiritual fruits was one thing, but if a martial artist were to cut off one of their own arms, that would be equivalent to ruining their future. Zhu Shuiyi's delicate body was trembling. She knew why Hang Zhan wanted her to stay, and this caused her to feel disgusted, furious, and terrified. "You still want to resist?" Hang Zhan smiled coldly. "Elder, you make them despair." "Yes, young master," the white-haired old man behind him said respectfully, and then slowly walked out, one step at a time. His original figure was stooped, looking like an old man, but now with every step he took, his back straightened slightly, and his aura continued to rise. Very soon, the faces of Lu Dong and the others turned pale. 9th layer of element gathering tier actually. Lu Dong and the others could not tell what cultivation level Elder Yu had. They only knew that he was very very strong, far stronger than they were. But no matter what layer of element gathering tier he was at, suppressing a few martial artists in body refining tier was naturally a piece of cake. They were done for. The faces of Lu Dong and the others were ashen. Though they were extremely unwilling, they could not help but admit that in terms of background they were inferior, and in terms of the strength in front of them they were similarly inferior. "You take off your veil," Hang Zhan said, pointing at Lu Yutong. The more he looked at Lu Yutong's figure, the hotter his heart became, and the more he wanted to see her true appearance. If Lu Yutong's appearance did not meet his expectations, he would definitely kill her with a single strike of his sword, because he had waited so long for nothing. Consequences. Of course, Hang Zhan did not even consider that the Stone Wolf sect was the ruler of this area. As long as they did not do anything to betray Rain Country, then what was the big deal about killing a few people? Lu Yutong naturally did not pay any attention to him. And did you not hear what I said? Hang Zhan was a little displeased. He was used to ordering people around, and the thing that annoyed him the most was when someone dared to disobey his orders. Lu Yutong looked towards Ling Han, and when she saw the smile on Ling Han's face, she stretched out her hand to the veil on her face, and gently took it off. All of a sudden, it was as if the entire world had lit up. There was actually such a beautiful woman in this world. She was truly an outstanding beauty, a beauty that could cause the downfall of empires. Although she was as cold and elegant as an iceberg, it also made one feel a strong desire to conquer her. If one could make this kind of icy beauty transform into a flattering pet that would submit to one's knees and act like a spoiled child, what kind of accomplishment would that be? Lu Dong and the others were stunned speechless by her beauty, but they immediately felt that it was a great pity that such a beautiful woman was going to fall into Hang Zhan's hands. Hang Zhan was naturally pleasantly surprised. He had never thought that he would actually encounter such a beautiful woman, and his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He laughed loudly and said, "Beauty, come here. Young master, be careful, she is an element-gathering tier," Elder Yu suddenly said, his aged face filled with caution. He could not tell the true level of this woman. Those with a higher cultivation level could sense the cultivation level of those with a lower cultivation level, but this was only possible if the distance between the two parties was sufficiently close. For example, Elder Yu was currently so far away from Lu Yutong that he could only sense that Lu Yutong's cultivation level had reached element-gathering tier, but he could not tell exactly which layer of element-gathering tier she was at. Lu Dong and the others, including Hang Zhan, were all shocked and wore expressions of disbelief. Chapter 24. Ling Muyun had finally managed to get a hold of Ling Han's weakness, so he naturally would not let his guard down. He said aggressively, "Alchemy is the most respected profession in Rain Country. Not only did you not greet my master, you even sat down. Just how arrogant are you? Hurry up and kneel down, and demand punishment from my master." Ling Dongxing frowned slightly. Alchemists were very rare, and their status in Rain Country was also very high. For example, the Zhu Dajuan in front of him was actually only in the 9th layer of body refining tier, but because he was a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist, even he and Ling Chongquan, who were powerful warriors of poly-tier, had to be polite and give him enough face. Now, if Ling Chongquan and his grandson used this point to attack him, Ling Han could really be in trouble. He clasped his hands in greeting and said, "Grandmaster Zhu, I am really sorry. If my son has been disrespectful in any way, I will apologize on his behalf. You are a magnanimous person, so please do not lower yourself to the level of a lowly dog." Zhu Dajuan did not notice Ling Han at all, and only realized what was going on when he heard Ling Muyun's words. He could not help but feel displeased, and said, "Patriarch of the Ling family, you are really capable. You invited me over for a meal and I gave you face, but you actually allowed your son to humiliate me. What kind of logic is that? Ling Han, hurry up and kneel down." Ling Muyun smirked coldly. He knew that alchemical pills were one of the most important assets of the Ling family, so on this matter, even Ling Dongxing could only give in and pressure Ling Han. Being forced by his own father. This must be extremely depressing and sad, right? Ha ha ha. Alchemist Zhu. Ling Dongxing still wanted to persuade him. However, Zhu Dajuan waved his hand, stopping Ling Dongxing from continuing. Without looking at Ling Han, he said indifferently, "Let your son kneel in front of me and explain." Bam. Ling Dongxing slammed the table heavily and said, "Pill Master Zhu, I don't know what benefits you received from the Cheng family to make things difficult for my Ling family on their behalf, but don't you go too far. You want to make my Ling Dongxing's son kneel down? How dare you?" Ling Chongquan immediately roared. "Ling Dongxing, where do you think the clan is? Do you want to destroy the clan? The clan doesn't belong to you alone. If you don't care about the clan at all, what right do you have to be the head of the Ling family? Ling Dongxing's gaze was awe-inspiring as he said, "Who exactly is the one who doesn't care about the big picture? Some things haven't been made clear, but I'm still taking into account the fact that we're all surnamed Ling. But you guys bullied my son like this. Do you think I, Ling Dongxing, am a dead man? Enough. If your family wants to quarrel, fine. Go back and quarrel. I'm very busy." Zhu Dajuan interrupted. "Hurry up and make this brat kneel and apologize." "Zhu Dajuan, who do you want to kneel?" Ling Han finally opened his mouth and said indifferently. Zhu Dajuan, Ling Chongquan and Ling Muyun were shocked at first. They thought to themselves that Ling Han had guts to directly call Pillmaster Zhu by his name, but they immediately revealed looks of joy. Ling Han had greatly offended Zhu Dajuan. This time Ling Dongxing and his son were definitely finished. Haha, this brat was indeed a scammer. Bastard, you actually dare to directly call my master by his name. How audacious. Ling Muyun immediately shouted. With such a good opportunity, he naturally wanted to suck up to Zhu Dajuan. But he didn't. Zhu Dajuan's expression immediately became ugly, and he even jumped up from his seat. How could Zhu Dajuan not have a deep impression of this voice? "Hurry up and kneel." "Pa!" Before Ling Muyun could finish his sentence, Zhu Dajuan shot forward like an arrow and raised his hand to give him a heavy slap. This slap stunned not only Ling Muyun, but also Ling Dongxing and Ling Chongquan. If this Zhu Dajuan wanted to slap someone, he should have done it to Ling Han. Why did he slap Ling Muyun? There must be a mistake somewhere. "Moss Master." Ling Muyun's expression was full of grievance. Why did he hit him? Under the puzzled gazes of the three, they saw Zhu Dajuan jog over to Ling Han. He lowered his head submissively, looking like an obedient little brother. He bowed and said, "So the esteemed guest is young Master Ling. Please forgive me for being blind and not noticing young Master Han just now." Though he had suffered a great loss at the hands of Ling Han, he didn't even know the latter's name. Zhu Hexian naturally didn't need to explain to him. What? The other three members of the Ling family were petrified at the same time. Was this really that insufferably arrogant alchemist Zhu just now? Why did it feel like he was a pug? Also, why did he call Ling Han young Master Han? One had to know that though Big Brother Zhu's cultivation level wasn't high, he was an alchemist, and his status was extremely respected. The three of them were petrified, completely unable to believe what they had seen and heard. "This is your disciple. So domineering," Ling Han said to Ling Muyun, his voice extremely calm. But Zhu Dajuan was scared half to death. He gave Ling Muyun another slap and said, "Who do you think you are, actually daring to be so rude to young Master Han? I don't have an apprentice like you. From now on, don't call me master anymore." Ling Muyun's expression was instantly filled with disbelief. He had been expelled from the sect just because of a single sentence from Ling Han. He recalled that Ling Han had once said that he wouldn't be able to become an alchemist, and it turned out that his words had come true. "No, master, don't expel me from the sect. Give me another chance." Ling Muyun hurriedly rushed to Zhu Dajuan's side, and said very sincerely, he wasn't a genius in martial art, and had also lost the chance to enter Huyang University. Thus, becoming an alchemist was his last hope. Otherwise, he would end up like his father and grandfather, only reaching Polytier in the end, ruling over a small gray cloud town. "Get lost, you actually dared to be so rude to young Master Han. Not killing you is already an act of mercy, and you still dream of becoming an alchemist?" Big Brother Zhu humphed. Even Zhu Hexian and the other grandmasters were extremely respectful to Ling Han. If he knew that Ling Muyun dared to have such an attitude towards Ling Han, it was possible that he would personally come and kill this guy. And with just a word from the grandmasters, which alchemist in Rain Country would dare to take Ling Muyun as a disciple? Ling Muyun couldn't help but turn the ground into dust. His expression was blank, as if he had lost his soul. "Let's go." Ling Chongquan grabbed his grandson. He knew that it was useless to say anything now, and it was better not to embarrass himself any further. "No, I'm an alchemist's apprentice. I'll become an alchemist in the future." Ling Muyun struggled with all his might, as if he had gone mad. But Ling Chongquan held on tightly to him, and the screams became more and more distant, finally disappearing. In the private room, Ling Dongxing was dumbfounded, and Zhu Dajuan was covered in cold sweat. He didn't know if Ling Han's anger had subsided, but he really couldn't afford to offend this person. "Just now you were quite fierce to my father," Ling Han said calmly, his tone filled with strong dissatisfaction. "Young Master Han, I didn't know that the head of the Ling family was your father. Otherwise, even if you gave me 100 guts, I still wouldn't dare to put on airs in front of the head of the Ling family," Zhu Dajuan said with a bitter expression. "I deserve to die, I'm really not a good person." He hardened his heart and began to slap himself again. "Ow!" Chapter 25. Ling Dongxing was already completely numb. He knew that his son was a genius now, but to be able to make an alchemist bow and scrape and purposely curry favor with him, this still shocked him greatly. Previously, Zhu Dajuan's attitude was so arrogant, aloof and condescending. He had asked many times before the other party agreed to attend the banquet. The moment he came, he found fault and made things difficult, vividly displaying the arrogance of an alchemist. But now he really didn't dare to believe that the other party would actually be so obsequious. What on earth had happened in these few days when he was away that could make his son so reborn? "Head of the Ling family, I really deserve to die. Don't worry, I'll have someone send the medicine over later," Zhu Dajuan said carefully. Thinking of his previous attitude towards Ling Dongxing, he couldn't help but feel nervous and scared half to death. Ling Han tapped his finger on the table and said, "Did the Chung family ask you to do this?" Young Master Han, I really didn't know that the head of the Ling family was your father, which was why I was deceived by the Chung family. You must believe me," Zhu Dajuan hurriedly explained. Ling Han smiled and said, "I believe you." Zhu Dajuan was instantly overjoyed, but he heard Ling Han continue, "With your personality, greed is real. In a situation where there aren't enough benefits, how could you work for the Chung family? Say it, what benefits did you receive from the Chung family?" This Zhu Dajuan hemmed and hawed, but when he saw Ling Han's sharp gaze, his heart instantly tightened and he hurriedly said, 30,000 silver coins. The Chung family is really generous. Ling Dongxing humphed. He was the head of the family, so he knew the meaning of 30,000 silver coins. The Chung family was similar to the Ling family. They had a shocking income, but their expenses were also very high. 30,000 silver coins might take 2 or 3 years to save. The Chung family was willing to give such a large sum of money to Zhu Dajuan, which meant that they really wanted to strangle the lifeline of the Ling family. Just as Ling Han had said, Zhu Dajuan was greedy. If Zhu Dajuan wanted him to resume supplying medicine to the Ling family, he would have to offer more than 30,000 taels of silver. The problem was that the Ling family had basically run out of liquid funds after the previous double blows. Where could they find 30,000 taels of silver? For the Chung family this was just a little bleeding, but for the Ling family it was absolutely a serious blow. Good thing he had a good son. Ling Dongxing couldn't help but reveal a smile. The Chung family would never have thought that the 30,000 taels of silver they took out would be for naught. 30,000 taels, that's a lot. Ling Han looked at Zhu Dajuan with a smile that was not a smile. Alchemists are really valuable. I need so much money to bribe you. Young Master Han must be joking. Zhu Dajuan wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. He wasn't stupid and could naturally tell that Ling Han was being sarcastic. Because of you, our Ling family has suffered serious losses these few days, Ling Han said calmly. Zhu Dajuan instantly shivered, but an idea flashed in his mind and he hurriedly said, although the main culprit is the Chung family, I also have an unshirkable responsibility. Thus, I have decided to donate the 30,000 taels of silver to the Ling family to make up for the Ling family's losses. Ling Dongxing was shocked. A greedy person like Zhu Dajuan was actually willing to give up the benefits that he had taken. Just how much did he fear his son? Ling Han nodded and said, I didn't make things difficult for you, did I? How could I? Even though his heart was bleeding, Zhu Dajuan's face was full of smiles and he said awkwardly, this is what I should do. It's a small token of my appreciation. That's good. Ling Han nodded. I need you to do something for me. Please speak, young Master Han, Zhu Dajuan said, full of flattery. From tomorrow onwards, transfer the portion of the alchemical pills distributed to the Chung family to the Ling family for sale. Ling Han said. Hearing this, Ling Dongxing was instantly overjoyed. Alchemical pills were one of the two main sources of income for the Ling family. Now that the number of alchemical pills could be doubled, the profits would naturally be doubled as well. Correspondingly, the Chung family's income would be sharply reduced by half. As long as this continued for a few years, the overall strength of the Chung family would fall far behind that of the Ling family, and the Ling family would be able to completely defeat the Chung family and become the #1 family in Grey Cloud Town, as well as the only great clan. Yes, no problem, Zhu Dajuan said hurriedly. In any case, he only needed to make some adjustments, and there was no loss to him in the slightest. No need, I'll still give you a small fee, Ling Han said with a smile. Young Master Han really knows how to joke, Zhu Dajuan said with a dry laugh. All right, there's nothing else for you to do. Go do what you need to do. Ling Han nodded and sent Zhu Dajuan away. It's better to eat before you leave, Ling Dongxing said politely. After all, he was asking for help. How would Zhu Dajuan dare? He hurriedly waved his hands and said, no need, I'll go do what I need to do first. He raised his hands in obeisance to Ling Han, and then to Ling Dongxing, and retreated all the way out the door. Han wouldn't treating him like this have the opposite effect? Ling Dongxing asked. After all, Zhu Dajuan was an alchemist. It was fine if he didn't give him any benefits, but he couldn't be so rude with his words, right? Don't worry, father. That guy bullies the weak and fears the strong. If you give him some face, he'll be the one to take advantage of, Ling Han said with a smile. Ling Dongxing didn't ask Ling Han why Zhu Dajuan would be so afraid and respectful of him. His son had already grown up, so he naturally had his own secrets. As his father, he only needed to support him. Moreover, he also needed to prepare for the next part of the plan. It was time to switch from defense to offense. Alchemist Zhu. When he saw Zhu Dajuan come out, his grandson Ling Chongquan walked out from the shadows and waved at him. This pair of grandfather and grandson didn't leave after leaving the shop. Instead, they waited there. In front of Ling Han, Zhu Dajuan was like a pug, but in front of others, he immediately recovered his arrogant appearance. He humped and said, what do you guys want? Alchemist Zhu, Muyun and Ling Han are brothers of the same clan. Can you make an exception and let Muyun continue learning the art of alchemy from you? Ling Chongquan asked with a smile. Zhu Dajuan smiled and said, Attendant Ling, I can't make the decision on this matter. If you want your grandson to become an alchemist in the future, you have to get young Master Han's approval first. Otherwise, even if you find another alchemist, it'll be useless. No one would dare to take your grandson as an apprentice. What? Ling Chongquan and his grandson both revealed expressions of disbelief. He was just a piece of trash, so how could he have this kind of power? You guys can choose not to believe me, but this has nothing to do with me, so don't drag me into this. Zhu Dajuan waved his hand. However, I'll still give you guys a piece of advice. Don't ever go against young Master Han. Furthermore, you guys don't know how lucky you are. They were all members of the Ling family, and there was no overnight enmity between a family. As long as they sincerely apologized to Ling Dongxing and his son, they would definitely receive benefits from them in the future. That was a man that even Grandmaster Zhu He-Exine and the others had to treat with respect. Chapter 26. Just as Zhu Dajuan said, this matter had nothing to do with him, so he patted his buttocks and left. He still had to immediately go do what Ling Han ordered him to do. Grandfather, we really have to listen to Ling Dongxing and his son's orders obediently, Ling Muyun said through gritted teeth. How could he be willing? Ling Han was famous for being a good-for-nothing. To listen to a good-for-nothing's orders, just thinking about it made him feel vexed. Of course not. Ling Chongquan waved his hand heavily. I've worked so hard for so many years. How can it be ruined by a good-for-nothing? Whether that brat is really good-for-nothing or pretending, he can't stop me from taking control of the Ling family. But grandfather, what do we do next? Ling Muyun appeared very lost. Wait, Ling Chongquan said in a low voice. Right now, the Chung family and we are in a very bad relationship. Although with Zhu Dajuan's help, Ling Dongxing can turn from defense to offense. The Chung family is not a grass-eating rabbit. If forced into a corner, they will definitely go all out. At that time we'll stab Ling Dongxing in the back and push him down from the position of family head. Ling Muyun's face lit up when he heard this, but his eyes were full of resentment. Grandfather, that brat Ling Han must be handed over to me. I want to kill him with my own hands. You will definitely get your wish. Ling Chongquan sneered. Early the next morning, Zhu Hexian personally came to visit the Ling family. This time, Ling Dongxing finally understood why Zhu Dajuan respected his son so much. Because even this black-grade alchemist stood respectfully in front of his son, looking like a good student. This solved one of his mysteries, but made him even more shocked. Before, he was only a yellow-grade alchemist, but now even a black-grade alchemist was extremely respectful to Ling Han. What was going on? This time Zhu Hexian came to deliver a message to Ling Han. It was rumored that an earth dragon grass had appeared in the Seven Wind Mountains. When Lu Yutong went to purchase the herbs for the little cloudwater pill a few days ago, she had also asked Zhu Hexian about the herbs on the other pill recipe. There were 4 herbs that were extremely rare, and even Tianyi did not have them in stock. At least, the branch in Rain Country didn't have it, but if it was higher up with Zhu Hexian's rank, she wouldn't be able to access it, much less transfer it. And this pill formula was used to treat Ling Dongxing's spirit root. It was called the Spirit Mending Pill, a mid-grade earth-grade pill. The earth dragon grass was one of the 4 missing herbs. Thus, when she heard the news, Zhu Hexian immediately made a trip down personally. Of course, on one hand, he wanted to inform Ling Han of this important clue. On the other hand, he wanted to consult Ling Han. Normally, he would not dare to disturb Ling Han. Ling Han was naturally overjoyed, but after he carefully inquired about the situation at the Seven Wind Mountains, he could only postpone his journey. That was because the person who spread the news was a powerful warrior in the 9th layer of Pali, but when he encountered a team of herb gatherers, he was already on the verge of death. He only had time to say a few limited words like, cave, giant crimson snake, earth dragon grass before he died. From this, it could be confirmed that there was earth dragon grass in the Seven Wind Mountains, but there should be a giant crimson snake standing guard, severely injuring a powerful warrior in the 9th layer of Pali. However, Ling Han knew that wherever there was earth dragon grass, there would usually be a red-scale dragon snake coiled around to absorb the weak dragon chi released by the earth dragon grass, slowly evolving itself from a snake to a dragon, completing a qualitative transformation. An adult red-scale dragon snake was in the 9th layer of Pali, and because it had a sliver of dragon's bloodline, its battle prowess far surpassed that of a normal warrior in the 9th layer of Pali. It was at least half a step into the Gushing Spring tier, an invincible king in the Pali tier. If Ling Han entered the Seven Wind Mountains now, even if he could find that cave, he would definitely not be a match for the red-scaled dragon snake. Even with Lu Yutong, it would be useless unless Lu Yutong could also reach half a step into the Gushing Spring tier. He definitely had to go to the Seven Wind Mountains, but he had to be fully prepared. Moreover, the inner core of the red-scaled dragon snake could be refined into a transcending origin pill. Taking one pill would allow a poly-tier martial artist to directly advance one tier, but the upper limit was the peak of the 3rd layer of Pali. Moreover, because the red-scaled dragon snake had a sliver of dragon's bloodline, its flesh and blood were very nutritious, allowing Ling Han to quickly advance to the 1st layer of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, Body of Dead Tree. He decided to continue his arduous cultivation, and only go to the Seven Wind Mountains after he reached the Pali tier. He could use the inner core of the dragon snake to quickly advance to the 3rd layer of Pali tier, and then easily break through to the 4th layer. Additionally, he also needed to improve his own abilities through actual combat, and strengthen his foundation. Even though he stood at the peak of martial art in his last life, but to be honest, his battle prowess was not the strongest. Possessing a high-level heaven-grade spirit base only allowed him to advance faster than others, but in a battle of the same tier, he still needed to improve his battle techniques and grasp of martial arts techniques. In his last life, Ling Han was definitely extremely intelligent, or else he would not have been able to become the unprecedented and unsurpassed alchemy emperor of his generation. However, a person's energy was ultimately limited. He spent most of his time on studying alchemy and concocting alchemical pills, and the remaining time was used to increase his tier, so how much time did he have to practice martial arts techniques? But this was not a problem because his tier increased too quickly. With the help of alchemical pills, How could his opponents fight against him? They only needed to use their tier to suppress him, and there was no need for any techniques at all. But after reaching the peak of martial art, this shortcoming was exposed. In Ling Han's last life, there were a total of 7 heaven-tier warriors in the world, and in terms of battle prowess, he could only be ranked at the bottom, because he had relied on the help of alchemical pills to increase his tier, and basically had not experienced any bloody battles. It could be said that he, as a heaven-tier warrior, was very weak. Of course, if he spent another 100 years studying martial arts techniques, he would definitely be able to make up for his lack of battle prowess. After all, he was too young. Even a 300-year-old heaven-tier warrior was rare in history, and could be counted on one hand. In this life, Ling Han did not want to be this kind of inferior product, so he must take one step at a time, making every step incomparably solid. Ling Han had no distractions. Every day, aside from diligently cultivating the 5 elements heaven grade skill, he also began to practice martial arts techniques. In his last life, he had long abandoned yellow grade and black grade martial arts techniques, and basically only used heaven grade martial arts techniques, occasionally using earth grade martial arts techniques. But now, he could only use yellow grade martial arts techniques, so he had to diligently cultivate to become the king of those in the same tier, and not rely on his tier to win. However, he had mastered many high-level techniques but very few low-level techniques. That was natural. In his last life, he was a heaven-tier warrior, so even if he found black grade and yellow grade martial arts techniques in ancient ruins, why would he cultivate them? Maybe he would pick up a few and flip through them, but definitely not many. Luckily, he had also walked all the way from a low-level warrior in his last life, and had mastered a few low-level martial arts techniques. Shocking electricity sword technique, flying flame palm technique, dashing leopard fist, and exiting cloud steps were all yellow grade high level. However, what made Ling Han a little embarrassed was that he had not cultivated these 4 martial arts techniques to the highest tier in his last life, because he did not have the time and was always busy concocting alchemical pills. Let's start from the beginning since he was still young. The reason why Ling Han practiced the shocking electricity sword technique first was very simple. His current tier was too low, and he needed the assistance of weapons. Moreover, the weapons that warriors loved to use the most were swords and sabers. Chapter 27. However, it is not that I am trying to discourage you, but among the participants of the Dayuan tournament, there is no lack of martial artists in the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier. You have only just broken through to Element Gathering tier, so no matter how talented you are, it is impossible for you to be on equal footing with those in the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier. Ling Dongxing changed the topic and reminded Ling Han. Having great ambition was a good thing, but if one was overconfident, then that was definitely a bad thing. Ling Han nodded. In martial arts, every small tier was a step and every third tier was a large step. Only a small number of geniuses would be able to surpass this large step and surpass their own cultivation level to achieve victory. He was currently only in the 1st layer of Element Gathering tier, and was still quite a distance away from the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier. What's more, there were some people who had long since reached the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier, and had yet to break through to Gushing Spring tier. However, they were still able to hone their skills to become even more solid, so their battle prowess would naturally increase by another level. If he reached the peak period of the 1st layer of Element Gathering tier, then with the power of his 5 elements origin nuclei, he would have a very high chance of winning even against someone in the middle stage of Element Gathering tier. But if it was against someone in the late stage of Element Gathering tier, then his chances of winning would be 50-50. After a while, I plan to go to 7 Wind Mountains to gain some experience, Ling Han said. Although he had already made this decision a long time ago, he still had to tell Ling Dongxing about it. Ling Dongxing was immediately shocked. He naturally knew what kind of place 7 Wind Mountains was. That was a world where demonic beasts ran amok, and there were extremely terrifying existences in the depths of the mountain forests. Even powerful warriors of spiritual ocean tier would not dare to venture too deep into the mountains. Ling Han was only in the 1st layer of Element Gathering tier, so entering 7 Wind Mountains was really too dangerous. Moreover, there were only 2 months until the end of the year, so even if he entered the mountains to gain experience, he would not be able to make much progress. Father, don't worry. I will only walk around the periphery and won't go too deep. He indeed did not have such plans, because the martial artist who discovered the earth dragon grass was only in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, so how could he possibly venture too deep into 7 Wind Mountains? Ling Dongxing was still worried, but he knew that his son had grown up and could not possibly listen to him for everything, so he could only give him a few more reminders. Thankfully, Ling Han was not about to set off immediately. The father and son chatted for a while. Then Ling Han returned to his room and took a good bath to wash off the dust on his body. He then took out a new set of clothes and changed into them, but he felt that they were a bit too tight. He was still growing, and this 1 month of training in the wilderness, not only had he grown a bit taller, his physique had also become much sturdier. Wearing his old clothes, he instantly felt that they were a size smaller. Thankfully, the Ling clan was not short of money. Ling Han called a servant over and had him take his measurements, then immediately go to a boutique to get some clothes for him to choose from. But when it came to Lu Yutong, he could not help but stop the servant and have Lu Yutong tell him her measurements so that he could get some clothes for her as well. There was a banquet at night, and this beautiful little female attendant was naturally going to attend as well. Not long after, the servant returned with a pile of clothes. There were more than 10 sets of both male and female clothing. Ling Han and Lu Yutong took their time to choose. Ling Han, on the other hand, was very quickly done choosing, but Lu Yutong tried on one after another. It was as if she was not very satisfied with any of them, yet she seemed to be very interested in every single one of them. It was not until the sun was about to set that Lu Yutong finally chose a piece of clothing. After changing into it, Ling Han could not help but whistle. It was really beautiful. She was originally an extremely beautiful woman, and now that she had changed into a lake green long dress, it fully displayed her delicate figure. Her round breasts, slender waist, slightly perky buttocks, and 2 long legs, she was filled with femininity. She had even deliberately put on some light makeup to make her facial features even more distinct. She was practically mesmerizing. When she saw Ling Han's slightly shocked expression, Lu Yutong could not help but feel a little proud. She had always been shocked by Ling Han, and now that she had finally put on the act, she felt very pleased with herself. She could not help but smile. She had originally been an icy beauty, and now that she had broken through the ice and smiled, she was really charming and alluring. Even with Ling Han's temperament, his eyes were a little dazed. "Let's go." Lu Yutong raised her jade-white chin slightly, forming an incredibly moving arc. She appeared to be a little proud. A beauty would always be a beauty. Every move she made would cause one to feel relaxed and happy. But after they left the room, Lu Yutong still covered her beautiful face with a veil, hiding her alluring features. This caused Ling Han to sigh inwardly in pity. At the same time, he was also a little proud, because he was the only one who could admire the beauty of a pretty female attendant. "Oh, that's right. Do you know if there are any relatively outstanding geniuses in Dayuan City?" Ling Han asked as they walked. Lu Yutong's footsteps paused slightly, and she said, "You want to participate in the Dayuan tournament?" "You are quite smart," Ling Han smiled. "Every 3 years, Rain Country will hold a national tournament. If you can get into the top 50 in the Dayuan tournament, you will even be guaranteed entry into Huyang Academy," Lu Yutong said. "This tournament is meant to prepare geniuses for Rain Country in the first place, so that was how it was. This was not a unique case of Dayuan City. If it's a genius..." Lu Yutong thought for a moment, then opened her rosy lips and said, "The Imperial City is too far away from here, so I am not very sure either. I only know of one person because he is also a student of Huyang Academy." "Who?" Ling Han asked casually. "Qi Yongyi, the 4th son of the current Dayuan king. Everyone calls him the Eternal Night King, and he indeed possesses outstanding talent and extraordinary battle prowess. When he was only in the 6th layer of Element Gathering tier, he had once killed a powerful warrior in the 8th layer of Element Gathering tier." Lu Yutong could not hide her admiration. Defeating and killing were 2 different things. 3 years ago, he was in the 6th layer of Element Gathering tier, and obtained the 2nd place in the Dayuan City tournament. Now, he should be in the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier. This was indeed a powerful opponent. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared. Only this kind of opponent would be satisfying to trample on. The 2 of them met up with Ling Dongxing, and the 3 of them boarded a carriage together, setting off from the Ling clan mansion. Following closely behind them was Ling Zhongquan and his grandson, who also boarded a carriage. "Father, you still haven't dealt with them?" Ling Han asked. Ling Zhongquan is, after all, the chief attendant of the Ling clan. Moreover, he has been in power for many years, so his influence is very deep. Although I have removed some of his influence, it is still not something that can be completely dealt with in a short period of time. Ling Dongxing frowned, looking slightly displeased. This pair of grandfather and grandson actually dared to snatch his son's place to enter Huyang Academy. They were absolutely shameless. Ling Han nodded. In the end, it was still a matter of power. If Ling Dongxing was in Gushing Spring Tier, even if Ling Zhongquan was given 100 times more courage, he would not dare to have the slightest bit of disloyalty. The carriage swayed back and forth, and after about 20 minutes, they arrived in front of the gates of the Cheng clan mansion. The Cheng clan was another great clan in Grey Cloud Town, so their mansion was naturally not something that a normal clan could compare with. It occupied an area of several tens of acres, and had tall walls that stood tall, like a huge beast that was crawling on the ground. Because the Ling clan was not the only one that had been invited today, all the clans that had a little bit of power in the town had received an invitation. Thus, the Cheng clan had long since laid out a red carpet at the main gates, and 8 servants stood on either side of the gates. When a guest arrived, they would shout loudly, and there would naturally be someone from within the mansion to welcome them. When Ling Han and the others alighted from the carriage, one of the servants immediately shouted loudly, "The esteemed guest has arrived." "Haha, Brother Ling, we've been waiting for you for a long time." A middle-aged man came out to welcome them, and raised his clasped hands in Ling Dongxing's direction. His face was as red as a date, and his figure was tall and sturdy. It was the clan head of the Cheng clan, Cheng Wenkuan. Chapter 28. Activating the shocking electricity swordsmanship. Ling Han swung his sword, his figure graceful. Complementing the shocking electricity swordsmanship was the exiting cloud steps. One step was 4 to 5 meters suddenly to the left, then to the right, then to the front, then to the back. It was strange, fast, and dazzling. Lu Yutong watched from the side and nodded to herself. If she had suppressed her cultivation to the 7th layer of body refining tier, she would definitely not have done better than Ling Han. On the contrary, she would have been in danger by now. After all, there was a difference of 2 layers and the opponent was a demonic beast. Normally, when a martial artist fought with a demonic beast, the martial artist needed to have the upper hand in terms of cultivation level. If the cultivation level was the same, the martial artist had a higher chance of losing. After all, not every martial artist was a battle genius. Ling Han's swordsmanship became smoother and smoother. His footwork was also like flowing water, enjoying the joy of battle. In his previous life, he had paid too much attention to alchemy. In terms of martial art, he had only focused on cultivation level, and he had been able to climb all the way up. But this time, on the road of martial art, he suddenly realized that martial art could be so interesting. The rotten blood wolf became his sparring partner, allowing him to display his skills to his heart's content, practicing the shocking electricity swordsmanship. 10 or so minutes later, the rotten blood wolf was covered in cuts and bruises. This made it very afraid. It turned out that this seemingly weak human was actually so powerful. It did not want to retreat, but it did not want to not be able to complete the feast and instead become food for these 2 people. "You can't run." Ling Han laughed loudly. His sword moved with his heart, and in a flash of cold light, 2 flashes of sword chi shot out. With 2 flashes of sword chi, he had finally achieved a breakthrough. Poo, blood splattered, and the rotten blood wolf's neck instantly burst open. Its huge body immediately collapsed, and its eyes were wide open, as if it could not believe that a human at the 7th layer of body refining tier could actually kill it. Demonic beasts were very intelligent, and strong demonic beasts were not inferior to humans at all. Ling Han nodded. The power of 2 flashes of sword chi was indeed great. Before, 1 flash of sword chi could only resist the rotten blood wolf, but 2 flashes of sword chi could instantly kill it. As expected, even if the cultivation level was the same, there could be a huge difference in the strength of martial artists. On the side, Lu Yutong was shocked speechless. In such a short amount of time, he had gone from 1 stream of sword chi to 2 streams of sword chi. If that uncle of hers were to find out about this, he would be so ashamed that he would jump into a river. That was because that uncle of hers had spent over 30 years to form 4 streams of sword qi, and was already known as a genius of the way of the sword by the clan. Yet she did not know how high Ling Han's starting point was, and how terrifying his comprehension ability was. Otherwise, how could he have reached the heaven tier at the age of 200 in his last life? Dinner is settled, Ling Han said with a smile. The two of them found a small stream and washed the rotten bloodwolf's body. Of course, they could not waste the beast's blood, so they put it all into a water bag. Later, Ling Han would bathe himself in the blood and extract the essence from it to temper his body. They started a fire, cut off a wolf leg and roasted it. They sprinkled some salt on it and soon a fragrant aroma wafted out. There was nothing to be particular about training in the wild. After they finished off the wolf leg with clean water, the sky was completely dark. They did not continue on their way, and instead meditated and cultivated by the stream. Ling Han bathed himself in the beast's blood and activated the indestructible heaven scroll, extracting the essence from the blood and transforming it for his own use. Only 10 minutes later, the extremely viscous beast's blood became thin, and the essence within it was completely used up. It is indeed very difficult to improve one's physique, Ling Han said in his mind. Under conscious defense, for example, a poly-tier martial artist with origin power could casually attack a body-refining tier martial artist, and it would be impossible to break through this layer of defense. However, without conscious defense, the defense of a poly-tier martial artist would not be much stronger than that of a body-refining tier martial artist. For example, if a poly-tier martial artist was ambushed by a body-refining tier martial artist while he was sleeping, then the possibility of him dying without even realizing it was very high. And to improve one's physique, this kind of defense would always exist, such as when one was sleeping or unconscious. However, improving one's physique was also extremely difficult, and a large amount of natural treasures were needed. For example, in his last life, Ling Han did not put any effort into improving his physique. Of course, the reason why the beast's blood was refined so quickly was because the indestructible heaven scroll was too powerful, and its efficiency was shockingly high. Otherwise, if it was something like stone skin technique, it might take 3 to 4 days to completely refine. Ling Han could clearly feel that his muscles had become denser, and his skin had also become tougher. If he used a sharp stone to scratch it, it would only leave a white mark. Not long later, he should be able to cultivate the body of dead tree. The night passed, and the two continued to walk in the mountains, searching for demonic beasts to battle. From the second day onwards, their luck seemed to improve, continuously encountering demonic beasts. Not only did it give Ling Han a very good chance for actual combat, it also contributed a lot of beast's blood to him, allowing him to continuously improve his cultivation of the indestructible heaven scroll. On the 4th day, they walked out of a forest and saw 5 people sitting on the grass in front of them. All of them looked like they had experienced a great battle, and all of them looked very disheveled. These 5 people were all youngsters, definitely not even 20 years old. 3 of them had reached the 9th layer of body refining tier, and the other 2 were in the 8th layer of body refining tier. In a small place like Grey Cloud Town, the cultivation of these 5 people could be called geniuses. Lu Yutong immediately took out a veil to cover her face. She was too beautiful, and it was very easy for her to cause trouble, though she was not afraid. "Brother, which town are you from?" one of the youths asked, his tone full of confidence. He should be from a rich family. Ling Han smiled and said, "Grey Cloud Town. We are all from Guarak Town," the youth said, and began to introduce himself. "I am Lu Dong, he is Chan Pengju, he is Li Hao, that guy is Zhou Chang, and this beauty is Zhu Shui, young Miss Zhu." Ling Han nodded at the 5 people and said, "I am Ling Han and this is Lu Yutong. Ling Han, we just found a green spiritual fruit, but there was a very powerful demonic beast guarding it, and we were unable to get it. How about it, are you interested in joining hands?" Lu Dong suggested to Ling Han. The reason he had come up to get close to them was also because of this. Oh, Ling Han's heart moved. Not only could the green spiritual fruit increase a cultivator's cultivation, it was also very beneficial for breaking through to the Poly realm. These 5 people were almost at the peak of the 9th layer of Poly, and if they could eat a green spiritual fruit at this time, it would be very helpful. Spirit fruits were different from medicinal pills. They were natural treasures and had no side effects at all, unlike medicinal pills, which would accumulate pill poison in the body if taken continuously. However, some spirit fruits' medicinal properties were too strong, and they could only be consumed after being refined. Otherwise, it would be suicide. What level is the demonic beast? Ling Han asked. Miasma Cloud Beast, 9th layer of body refining tier, Zhou Chang answered. Ling Han suddenly understood. No wonder these 5 people had no way to deal with it. That was because the Miasma Cloud Beast would spit out large amounts of poisonous miasma in battle, and when fighting it, they would need to hold their breath. But in an intense battle, even if you were a cultivator, how long could you hold your breath? As a result, without overwhelming power to end the battle in an extremely short amount of time, it was impossible to defeat the Miasma Cloud Beast. However, you must first receive one of my sabers to prove that you have the strength to do so, Li Hao said, a cool expression on his face. He waved the saber in his hand, showing off very much. Chapter 29. You have to be careful, he's at the 9th layer of body refining tier, and he's also known as the Saber Maniac. Whenever he talks about sabers, he's definitely not joking. Zhu Shui reminded him, if you're not at the 7th layer of body refining tier, it's best if you don't take it head on. Ling Han nodded and smiled. I only need to take one move. One move. Li Hao continued to act cool, looking like a great expert. Alright, come. Ling Han did not boast, nor did he look down on him, he just nodded calmly. Li Hao moved and arrived in front of Ling Han, his right hand on the hilt of the saber at his waist, but he did not pull it out. His left foot in front, his right foot behind, his upper body slightly leaning forward, his expression extremely focused. Ling Han was slightly astonished. This guy was actually quite decent. He vaguely had the bearing of a saber user. Li Hao suddenly pulled out his saber, and a cold light flashed as he slashed towards Ling Han. Ding! A sharp sound rang out and sparks flew everywhere. Ling Han drew his sword just in time and slashed at the saber's body. However, the sword did not meet the saber head-on, but instead slashed from the tip of the saber to the hilt, using this method to neutralize the weight of the saber. The sword moved nimbly. Li Hao's saber was instantly neutralized. Zhu Shui and the others were all surprised. The strength that Ling Han displayed in this attack was only at the 7th layer of body refining tier, but he was able to neutralize Li Hao's full force attack in such a way, displaying outstanding swordsmanship. You pass. Li Hao nodded, his face still full of arrogance. However, Ling Han flicked his sword and said, You take one of my attacks as well. Haha, are you testing me? Li Hao laughed loudly. Ling Han being able to take one of his attacks did not mean that he could fight him to a draw. These were two completely different things. You can say that. Ling Han laughed, do you dare? Then bring it on, Li Hao said confidently. After the exchange of blows just now, he could confirm that Ling Han's cultivation level was only at the 7th layer of body refining tier. Although both of them were at the late stage of body refining tier, the difference in strength between 2 layers was still quite obvious. Ling Han twirled the sword in his hand and suddenly thrust it out, aiming straight for Li Hao's neck. Naturally, Li Hao was not afraid. He brandished his saber to parry the attack, and with a ding, the long sword stopped right in front of his throat, only a few millimeters away. You've lost. Ling Han sheathed his sword. I clearly blocked you. Just as Li Hao opened his mouth, he saw Ling Han's long sword shake, and a white cold light flashed out. Sword Qi! Lu Dong and the other 4 exclaimed simultaneously. Li Hao's expression couldn't help but darken. He naturally knew the power of Sword Qi. He nodded and said, I've lost. Just now, if Ling Han had unleashed his Sword Qi, he would already be a corpse. Lu Dong and the others were scared half to death. They already felt that Ling Han being able to block one of Li Hao's saber strikes was already very impressive, but this guy had actually formed Sword Qi. It was really inconceivable. Li Hao's fighting spirit rose again, and he said, let's spar again. He had never fought against someone who had formed Sword Qi before, so it was very rare. All right. Ling Han nodded in agreement. He also had some intentions of nurturing Li Hao, and felt that this kid could possibly walk the path of a swordsman. As he spoke, his right hand shook, and the long sword struck out again. Li Hao naturally gave it his all, and hurriedly brandished his saber, wanting to use the weight of the saber to send Ling Han flying. using offense as defense. Ding 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 ding, the two fought fiercely. This time Li Hao wasn't instantly killed, but he suffered quite a bit. This was because Ling Han's sword qi had created many wounds on his body. After a few dozen moves, Li Hao decisively admitted defeat. If the fight continued, just the blood loss alone would be enough to kill him. Sword qi is really powerful, he said somewhat dispiritedly, but also somewhat excitedly. If he could also form saber qi, the situation might be very different. Don't be discouraged, you're already very good, Ling Han said to the point. Even though he hadn't spent much time on the path of the sword in both of his lives, he was an extremely intelligent person, especially since he had once reached the height of the heaven tier. Practicing the sword for a day was equivalent to a body refinement tier practitioner practicing for a year, or even several years. How old was Li Hao to be able to compete with him in terms of skill? Zhu Shui and the others were both surprised and delighted. They were surprised that Li Hao, the #1 expert among them, was still not a match for Ling Han. They were delighted that with the help of such an expert, their chances of obtaining the green spiritual fruit would naturally greatly increase. The 7 of them set off, heading towards the location of the green spiritual fruit. So Brother Ling is the successor of the Ling clan of Grey Cloud Town. How strange, a genius like Brother Ling, we should have long heard of him. On the way, Ling Han became the focus of the 5 people's attention, and was naturally bombarded by their questions. This was very normal because his previous self didn't know that he had an immortal grade spirit base, and even more so didn't know about the 5 elements heaven grade skill. It would be strange if he could become famous everywhere. Ling Han only said that he had been rather low-key in the past, so he put this question aside. Although Zhu Shui and the others were also very interested in Lu Yutong, she had been cold and did not say anything, and Ling Han also did not have any intention of introducing her to them, so they could only be secretly curious in their hearts. Close to an hour later, they arrived at an extremely damp place. Impressively, there was a cave in front of them, and before they had even entered, they could already smell a disgusting stench. However, they could faintly make out a plant that was at least a meter long. It had a stem but no leaves like a sugar cane, but there were fruits hanging on the stem, no more no less, exactly 7. If we get any closer, we will be affected by the poison miasma, and we will have to hold our breath to advance. That miasma cloud beast is very cunning, and will definitely not leave the area of the poison miasma. We need to lure that miasma cloud beast out. As long as we can block it for a few breaths of time, we will be able to uproot the spirit fruits. Lady Lu and Shui will be in charge of uprooting the green spirit fruits, and the 5 of us will block the miasma cloud beast. Is that all right? This was mainly said to Ling Han. There was one person on each side to retrieve the fruits, so that they would not be snatched and run away. Ling Han smiled and nodded. If they knew what cultivation level Lu Yutong was at, they probably wouldn't have made such a suggestion. Let's lure the miasma cloud beast out first. If we fight in the cave, we will not be able to make use of our advantage in numbers, Zhou Chong said. The 5 boys all took out their weapons and knocked them against each other, creating a noisy noise. In just a short while, a creature that looked like a wild boar ran out from the cave. Its body was covered with air sacs, and it was constantly spitting out gray mist. 2 thick and long tusks protruded from its lips like 2 short spears, giving off a very oppressive aura. This was the miasma cloud beast. Among the body refinement tier demonic beasts, it could definitely be considered a top-tier existence. The miasma cloud beast appeared at the entrance of the cave, but did not attack. It only grinned at the 5 of them and growled. The air sacs all over its body spat out gray mist, forming a dark cloud above its head. Attack! Zhou Chong shouted loudly, and was the first to leap out. Lu Dong, Chan Pengju, and Li Hao followed closely behind. The 4 of them simultaneously brandished their weapons and attacked the miasma cloud beast. Ling Han, however, did not move and only stood there quietly. For against 1, although Li Hao and the others had the advantage in numbers, under the assault of the poison miasma, they were unable to display their battle prowess at all. After a few exchanges, they were at a disadvantage. They could not help but feel anxious. They had agreed to attack together, so why was Ling Han just standing there and watching? Shua, at this moment, Ling Han struck out with his sword, as fast as a ray of light. Chapter 30. A Beautiful Romance. The timing of this strike was ingenious. It was the moment when the miasma cloud beast's defense was weakened after it had neutralized the attacks from Lu Dong and the other three. Shua, the long sword, slashed past like a flying immortal from the heavens. With a puff, the sword directly pierced through the miasma cloud beast's right eye, all the way to the hilt. Pong, the miasma cloud beast fell heavily to the ground. It had actually died in one strike. What? Mother! His? Lu Dong and the other three, including Zhu Shuiyi who was hiding at the side, all gasped and cried out in surprise. That was the miasma cloud beast, a peak existence among the refinement tier demonic beasts, but it had actually been killed in one strike. How could they accept this? But immediately they all ran away. Every time they spoke they would take deep breaths. They had all swallowed some miasma and had to circulate their energy to neutralize it immediately. Otherwise their internal organs might be corroded. After a while, Lu Dong walked over and patted Ling Han's shoulder saying, "I thought you were so scared that you didn't dare to make a move. So you're actually this powerful. Your first move was so swift and fierce. Haha, Brother Ling is really amazing. He actually killed the miasma cloud beast with one strike," Li Hao also said. As a bladesman, he was also very excited to be able to appreciate such a clean and neat strike. Ling Han only smiled. The lower the tier, the easier it was to challenge those of a higher tier. Moreover, the miasma cloud beast had been mostly distracted by Lu Dong and the other three, which gave him the opportunity to kill it with one strike. Otherwise, if it was one-on-one, Ling Han would definitely not be able to defeat the miasma cloud beast unless he had taken the antidote. After the miasma had dissipated, they picked the green spiritual fruits one by one, but did not touch the roots. Their previous plan was due to time constraints, and they could only uproot the whole thing. Now that the miasma cloud beast was dead, they naturally did not have to do so. After all, this was a spirit medicine of heaven and earth. There were 7 green spiritual fruits, one for each person. Although Lu Yutong had kept it, she would definitely hand it over to Ling Han the moment she turned around. Humph, put down the spirit fruits. A cold voice rang out as 2 men walked over. One was an old man and the other was a young man. The younger one was only in his 20s, while the older one was in his 70s or 80s with a head full of white hair. The one who spoke was the young man. He walked in front while the old man followed behind like a servant. Ling Han's gaze swept over them. With his heaven-tier divine sense, he could naturally tell with a glance that this young man was at the 9th layer of body refining tier, while the old man had reached the 9th layer of poly. "Who are you? Why are you so arrogant?" Lu Dong immediately stood up and shouted at the other party. The young man's gaze swept across Zhu Shuiyi's delicate body and pretty face, revealing a trace of desire. After that, he said in disdain, "You don't even know me, Hang Zhan? Hehe, you should have heard of the Stone Wolf sect, right? This young master is the eldest grandson of the Stone Wolf sect's 7th elder." Stone Wolf Gate. Upon hearing these 3 words, the faces of Lu Dong and the rest changed at the same time, revealing a deep sense of fear. In Rain Country, a sect could not be casually called sect, society, gang. These were the 4 levels. Only a sect with a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier could be called a sect with a powerful warrior of gushing spring tier could be called a sect, and so on. A sect with only a warrior of poly could only be called a society, and a gang was the lowest level. Stone Wolf sect was the strongest sect within 1,000 miles radius. It was said that the 9 elders of the sect were all powerful warriors of gushing spring tier, and the sect leader was at the peak of the 9th layer of gushing spring tier. If what this Hang Zhan said was true, and his grandfather was really the 7th elder of Stone Wolf sect, then his background was indeed terrifying. Ha ha ha. Now you know who this young master is. Put down the spirit fruits, each of you break an arm and you can get lost. However, these 2 girls have to stay. Hang Zhan glanced at Lu Yutong again. Although he could not see her face, her graceful figure still made his heart beat faster. With his experience of seeing countless women, this girl was definitely a beauty. Lu Dong and the others were all furious. Leaving behind the spirit fruits was one thing, but they still had to break an arm? If a martial artist broke an arm, then that was equivalent to destroying their future. Zhu Shuiyi's delicate body trembled. She knew why the other party wanted her to stay, and this made her feel disgusted, angry, and terrified. Still want to resist? Hang Zhan laughed coldly. Elder Yu, make them despair. Yes, young master. The white-haired old man behind him said respectfully, and then slowly walked out step by step. His original figure was stooped, looking old and clumsy, but now with every step he took, his back straightened slightly, and his aura continued to rise. Very soon Lu Dong and the others turned pale. 9 layers of poly. Actually, Lu Dong and the others could not tell what cultivation level Elder Yu had. They only knew that he was very, very strong, far stronger than they were. But no matter how many layers of poly he had, suppressing a few body refining tier martial artists was naturally a piece of cake. They were done for. Lu Dong and the others' faces were ashen. Though they were extremely unwilling, they had to admit that in terms of background they were inferior, and in terms of strength they were also inferior. You take off your veil, Hang Zhan said, pointing at Lu Yutong. The more he looked at Lu Yutong's figure, the hotter his heart became, and the more he wanted to see her true appearance. If Lu Yutong's appearance did not meet his expectations, he would definitely kill her with a single strike, because he had waited for so long for nothing. Consequences. Hang Zhan naturally did not think that the Stone Wolf sect was the king of this area. As long as they did not do anything to betray Rain Country, then what was the big deal about killing a few people? Lu Yutong naturally wouldn't pay any attention to him. Didn't you hear what I said? Hang Zhan was a little displeased. He was used to ordering people around, and the thing that annoyed him the most was when someone dared to disobey his orders. Lu Yutong looked towards Ling Han, and when she saw the smiling expression on Ling Han's face, she stretched out her hand to her veil, and lightly took it off. For a moment it was as if the entire world had lit up. There is actually such a beautiful woman in the world. She was truly an outstanding beauty, capable of causing the downfall of cities and countries. Although she was as cold and elegant as an iceberg, it gave rise to a strong desire to conquer her. If such an ice beauty could be turned into a coquettish pet, what kind of accomplishment would that be? At first, Lu Dong and the others were stunned by her beauty. However, they immediately felt that it was a pity that such a beauty was going to fall into Hang Zhan's hands. Hang Zhan was naturally pleasantly surprised. He didn't expect to meet such a beauty, and his eyes were about to pop out. He laughed loudly and said, "Beauty, come here." "Young master, be careful, she's in the poly realm," Elder Yu suddenly said, his face full of caution. He couldn't tell how strong this woman was. A person with a higher realm could sense the cultivation of a person with a lower realm, but this required the two parties to be close enough. For example, Elder Yu was so far away from Lu Yutong that he could only sense that Lu Yutong's cultivation had reached the poly realm, but he didn't know which level of poly she was at. Lu Dong and the other 4, including Hang Zhan, were all shocked. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Chapter 31. After this incident with the Chung clan, the two clans that had originally been on equal footing in Grey Cloud Town immediately headed towards different fates. The Ling clan's influence was growing day by day, and they already had the status of being the first great clan in Grey Cloud Town. Meanwhile, the Chung clan's bottom was on fire, and they were facing an extremely difficult situation. Not being able to keep up with the flow of funds was one thing, but more importantly, their morale had been completely suppressed. Ling Dongxing had a good son. This was the common understanding of everyone in Grey Cloud Town. No one would remember that just 2 months ago, this good son was still publicly acknowledged as trash and a laughingstock. The small clans in the town all had frequent dealings with the Ling clan. If they wanted to become in-laws with the Ling clan, their target was naturally the once great trash, but now the great genius Ling Han. Of course, the Shun clan had become a laughingstock. They had originally already had a fine son-in-law in Ling Han, yet they themselves had rejected him. Who knew how Shen Ziyan was feeling right now? Chun Fenglai had just left when a member of the Stone Wolf sect arrived. His name was Ma Lang. He had brought with him the law enforcement team of the Stone Wolf sect, and they came in a threatening manner. They went from house to house, conducting an investigation, as if they were looking for someone. When Ling Han found out about this, a thought flashed through his mind. Could it be that these people had come for Hang Zhan? Very soon, Ma Lang and his men arrived at the Ling clan residence. The Stone Wolf sect was the ruler of the surrounding 1,000 miles. This time, Ma Lang had come as a representative of the Stone Wolf sect, so everyone had to give him enough face. Thus, all the important people of the Ling clan had gathered in the main hall to receive this special envoy. Ling Han arrived late, and when he arrived at the main hall with Lu Yutong, the main hall was already filled with people. He shook his head at the servant who was just about to greet him, and quietly walked over. There was only one person in the main hall who did not belong to the Ling clan. He was a young man dressed in white, and looked to be about 23 or 24 years old. His looks were average, but his whole body was exuding a powerful aura, and his face was filled with soaring confidence. If there was any flaw, it would be that the smile on this guy's face was really too fake, so fake that anyone who saw it would feel nauseous. Other than that, there was a row of black-robed men standing outside the main hall. All of them had the cultivation level of element gathering tier, but their cultivation level was not very high. They all seemed to be in the second or third layer, and none of them had advanced into the fourth layer. The fourth layer and the seventh layer would always be a bottleneck. This white-robed young man should be Ma Lang, Ling Han thought to himself. He once again turned his gaze towards him. This person's cultivation level was much higher, having reached the sixth layer of element gathering tier. In this area, coupled with his age, he could definitely be called a genius, leaving Shen Ziyan, Chang Xiang and the others in the dust. Ling clan head, in the past month, has anyone from your clan entered the Balance Mountain? Ma Lang asked. Ling Dongxing's heart jumped. He naturally knew that Ling Han had just returned from the Balance Mountain, but coincidentally, the other party had asked him this question. How could he not be on guard? However, he had been the clan head for many years after all, so he was naturally very shrewd. His expression did not change, and he said, as far as I know, no one from the clan has entered the Balance Mountain. Fortunately, Ling Han had been very discreet when he came and went. The members of the clan only knew that Ling Han had disappeared for about a month, but no one knew exactly where he had gone. So that's how it is. Ma Lang nodded, and did not say anything else. He only sat there, his eyes closed, and it was unknown what he was thinking. Ling Dongxing knew what was going on, and hurriedly ordered someone to bring over a wooden box. He said, Young Master Ma has had a hard journey. This is a small token from the Han clan. It's nothing much, but please accept it, young Master Ma. Only then did Ma Lang open his eyes. After receiving the wooden box, he did not try to avoid suspicion, and actually opened it on the spot. There were only a few thin pieces of paper inside, but Ma Lang flipped them over and revealed a smile. Those were silver notes, each with a face value of 500 taels. There were 4 of them, which meant that there was a total of 2,000 taels of silver. This was not a small sum of wealth. He had been ordered to move out, and his original intention was to take advantage of the situation by leading the enforcement team of Stone Wolf sect. Who would not fear him, because he was now representing Stone Wolf sect. These few days he had already visited all the small clans in Grey Cloud Town, and placed the 2 great clans, the Ling and Chang clans, at the very back. As expected, great clans were great clans, generous when they went out. Now that he had gained some benefits, he was naturally in a good mood. He suddenly stood up and said, I am under the orders of 7th Elder to arrest a criminal. If Clan Head Ling knows that someone has entered Balance Mountain in the past month, you must inform me. I will stay in town for a few more days. Definitely. Ling Dongxing agreed. He also stood up and said, I will see young Master Ma off. Ma Lang nodded cheerfully, and put on the air of an imperial envoy. He clasped his hands behind his back and began to walk. Young Master Ma. It was at this moment that someone suddenly spoke up. It was Ling Zhongquan. Ma Lang frowned, turned around and asked, What is it? I suddenly remembered that someone from the clan has disappeared for more than a month. Perhaps he has gone to Balance Mountain. Ling Zhongquan said, a cold smile on his face. Oh, who is it? Ma Lang asked. This person's name is Ling Han, and he is the son of our clan head. Ling Zhongquan had been waiting for the other party to ask, so he quickly answered. Hearing what he said, everyone in the Ling family cursed him in their hearts. Not to mention the fact that Ling Han was now the hope of the Ling clan, the future pillar of support, even if he was still that trash from before, as long as his surname was Ling, he could not help an outsider. With such a temperament, He still wanted to become the clan head? Then there would really be no hope for the Ling clan. Ling Dongxing was naturally even more enraged, secretly regretting that he had not cleaned up the clan sooner. Seeing that they all shared the surname of Ling, he had not killed them all. But he had never thought that Ling Zhongquan would be so heartless and heartless. Ma Lang turned his head towards Ling Dongxing and asked, "Clan head Ling, is there such a thing?" Ling Dongxing's expression did not change, and he said, "My son did indeed leave the clan a month ago to gain experience, but he did not go to Balance Mountain." "Oh, then where did he go?" Ma Lang's eyes narrowed. 7 Wind Mountains. Ling Han stepped out. "So you are Ling Han?" Ma Lang turned his gaze towards him. "I am Ling Han." Ling Han nodded. Ma Lang stared at Ling Han, his expression extremely stern, causing everyone to feel a chill as if a storm was brewing. "Ha ha ha ha." He suddenly laughed, walked over and patted Ling Han's shoulder, and said, "Don't be so nervous, I was only asking casually. I still have to go to the Chung clan residence, and will come look for you in the future. I think we should be able to get along very well." This young man was really temperamental. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "We shall meet again someday. Clan head Ling, there is no need to see me off." Ma Lang waved his hand and left with the men in black. Only when his silhouette had disappeared did the people in the hall breathe a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, they had actually broken out in a cold sweat, which was enough to prove what kind of pressure this young man had brought to them. Poisonous snake, that's right, he was a poisonous snake. This young man was like a poisonous snake. Even if they were in the same room with him, they would still be so nervous that they would break out in a cold sweat. Chapter 32. Ling Han sheathed his sword and smiled. "Will you tell anyone about what happened today?" "Of course not." Lu Dong and the rest shook their heads. "That's right. If we don't say anything, who would know that Hang Zhan and the rest died here?" Ling Han said. Lu Dong and the rest were still worried. After all, the name Stone Wolf sect was too scary. They could destroy their clans 100 times over with a flip of their hands. With this mentality, they did not dare to stay here any longer, afraid that Ling Han would silence them. Furthermore, they each had a green spiritual fruit in their hands, so they were all uneasy. They quickly bade farewell to Ling Han and disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Ling Han naturally had no intention of silencing them. His little handmaiden was the daughter of the Lu family in the imperial city. What was Hang Zhan compared to her? If the Stone Wolf sect knew that Hang Zhan dared to have evil thoughts about Lu Yutong, they would probably cut off Hang Zhan's head to apologize. Just like how Lu Dong and the rest feared the Stone Wolf sect, what was the Stone Wolf sect to the 8 great clans? "I'll eat a green spiritual fruit first. Once I reach the peak of physique refining stage 9, I'll eat a second one," Ling Han said in his heart. Although he had already gone through the 9 realms from physique refining stage to celestial being realm, it did not mean that he could break through the bottleneck of a large realm in one go. This was because other than comprehension of the realm, breaking through required the support of a large amount of energy. Where could the energy come from? Spirit herbs, medicinal pills, beast treasures, and spiritual liquid of heaven and earth were all fine, but these things were pitifully scarce. This was also why the higher the realm, the fewer martial artists there were. If there were no auxiliary treasures to provide energy, then they could only rely on themselves to slowly accumulate energy. Some people could succeed, but some people would explode from overexertion. If it wasn't for the green spiritual fruit, Ling Han would have needed to accumulate origin power for about 10 days to reach the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier. Then, he would be able to break through to element gathering tier in one go. But it was different now. When the time came, he would only need to eat the green spiritual fruit, and success would follow naturally. Ling Han searched Hang Zhan and Elder Yu for their belongings. Since they were out, they naturally wouldn't bring many things with them. They only had some silver notes and a martial arts manual. The banknotes amounted to more than 100,000 taels of silver, which was considered a considerable amount of wealth. The secret manual, on the other hand, was the detonation technique, which was somewhat special. It could inject origin power into an object and cause it to explode. If it was used to attack an enemy, it would be impossible to defend against. Elder Yu probably hadn't mastered this secret technique yet. Otherwise, Lu Yutong would definitely be at a disadvantage if she was caught off guard. After all, there were 2 corpses there and it would affect their mood. Ling Han sat cross-legged and took out a green spirit fruit. After washing it with clean water, he ate it in big mouthfuls. As expected of a spirit fruit of heaven and earth. Even if its rank wasn't high, it was still incomparably delicious. He finished it in 2 or 3 bites, making him feel extremely unsatisfied. He wished he could take the other one and eat it as well. He hurriedly suppressed this desire and quietly waited for the medicine to take effect. In just a short while, the rich medicinal energy dispersed into countless tiny particles, entering his blood vessels and circulating throughout his body. Ling Han circulated the 5 elements heaven-grade technique. The spirit root in his dantian glowed like a lotus, guiding the medicinal energy to nourish every piece of flesh, every bone, and every blood vessel in his body. His cultivation speed was already extremely fast. Before consuming the green spirit fruit, he had already reached the middle stage of level 7. Now that he had the help of the spirit fruit, his cultivation speed was naturally even more terrifying. Later stage of level 7, pinnacle of level 7. After accumulating a bit of origin power, he charged up to the 8th layer of body refining tier in one go. At this time, the medicinal power of the green spiritual fruit had not been exhausted yet, and was still quickly increasing his cultivation level. It only stopped when he reached the middle stage of the 8th layer of body refining tier. Very good, it saved him about 6 days of time. In Lu Yutong's eyes, a strange thought arose in her mind. For the first time, she wasn't surprised by Ling Han's sudden increase in cultivation level, because this time it was too normal. He had eaten a green spirit fruit after all. The two of them continued to wander around the mountains. Ling Han was still honing his sword technique, wanting to reach the level of 3 flashes of sword chi before breaking through to the Pali realm. Another 8 days later, Ling Han reached the peak of level 8. After accumulating origin power for a night, he began to break through to level 9. When the sun rose in the morning, he also stood up, the corner of his mouth revealing a hint of a smile. Level 9 of level 9. Very good. He only needed about 10 more days to reach the peak of level 9 of level 9. Then, after consuming the green spirit fruit, he would charge up to the Pali realm in one go. Lu Yutong was naturally already numb. She reckoned that if Ling Han broke through to level 9 of level Pali tomorrow, she wouldn't be surprised. Otherwise, if she was shocked by this guy every time, she would definitely die young. Suddenly, 10 days passed, and just as he expected, Ling Han reached the peak of level 9 of body refining. He took out the green spirit fruit, revealed a smile and said, "Today is my last day in level 9 of body refining. Sigh, it's really been a long time." Lu Yutong couldn't help but roll her eyes. She had followed Ling Han all the way from level 2 of level 9 of body refining. How many days and a month had it been? Was this considered a long time? But when she thought about how Ling Han had been stuck at level 2 of body refining for a few years, this sigh seemed to make some sense. She started cultivating at the age of 13, and reached level Pali at the age of 14. Just from this point alone, her progress was indeed much faster than Ling Han's. After Ling Han swallowed the green spirit fruit, he began to break through to the Pali realm. He wasn't in a hurry, and was only accumulating the medicinal power. When an ordinary person broke through a barrier, they relied on the support of the medicinal power, continuously breaking through wave after wave until the barrier loosened, and then they would be able to break through. But Ling Han had absolute confidence that as long as he accumulated enough energy, he would be able to succeed in one go. Half an hour later, his body was already filled with origin power, and he felt as if his entire body was swelling up. Of course, this was a kind of illusion. It was because he had accumulated too much energy in his body, which was why it gave him this feeling of swelling up. But if he still didn't break through, or if he didn't release this energy, his body would really explode because of this energy. This was like a water bag that was filled to the brim. If he didn't poke a hole to release the water, or change to a bigger one, it would only explode. Almost there, Ling Han said in his heart, guiding the boundless energy toward his dantian. Level 9 of body refining realm was to store origin power in every piece of flesh and blood in the body, so the amount was relatively limited. And level Pali was to open up the dantian, forming a strange space within the body. Everyone's body had a small universe, a small world, and martial art believed that this small world existed within the dantian. Boom! Under the violent impact of the energy, A hole immediately appeared in the dantian, a crack. If it was an ordinary person breaking through, they would rely on wave after wave of impact, causing this hole and this crack to continuously expand. But Ling Han was different. He had accumulated too much energy, so he directly broke through. Opening up the dantian was the first step, and the next step was the most important. Condensing the origin power into a high-speed revolving nucleus. This was like installing a motor in the dantian, and with a thought, the origin nucleus could transmit energy at high speed, exploding with a terrifying attack. Why was level poly realm crushing level 9 of body refining realm? It was because after forming the origin nucleus, energy would surge like a tide. Even if both parties had accumulated the same amount of origin power, the attack of the one who formed the origin nucleus would be faster and fiercer, possessing an overwhelming advantage. Chapter 33. Ling Han opened up his dantian, but could only be considered half a step into the poly tier. It only increased the upper limit of origin power that his body could hold, but the increase in power depended on whether he could form an origin nucleus. Who knew how many people in the 9th layer of body refining tier were stuck at this step? Poly-tier martial artists could form a total of 9 origin nuclei, and after forming 9 nuclei, they could break through to the gushing spring tier. But for Ling Han, forming nuclei was a piece of cake. He'd done it 9 times in his last life. He began to form the nucleus. Powerful origin power surged, gathered, intertwined, and fused. He was familiar with this process, and very soon the origin power formed a nucleus which was as thin as a strand of hair. But he was immediately stunned because in his dantian, there were actually 5 origin nuclei. How was this possible? He'd just broken through to the poly tier, and now he was in the 5th layer of the poly tier? No, this was impossible because these 5 origin nuclei were too small, far from reaching the limit. He'd never heard of an origin nucleus that could form 5 at once, and then expand to the limit at the same time. Moreover, these 5 origin nuclei were too close to each other, attracting and repelling each other, forming a subtle balance. The colors were also different: gold, green, white, red, and black. Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. This was the materialization of the 5 elements, and these 5 origin nuclei represented gold, wood, water, fire, and earth respectively. Could it be that multiple elemental spirit base could form multiple origin nuclei? But why hadn't he heard of this in his last life? No, Ling Han thought carefully. These 5 origin nuclei had achieved a perfect balance. No matter which origin nucleus was slightly stronger, it would destroy this balance. Then only the strongest origin nucleus could live to the end, and the other origin nuclei would be pushed aside and destroyed. Based on this, to form 2, 3, 4, and this limit of 5 origin nuclei, one had to have a perfect balance between the elemental attributes of the spirit base. Only then would the formed origin nuclei also achieve a balance, and neither could swallow the other. In this world, there were many people who possessed 2 or even 3 or even 4 types of spiritual roots. However, the number of spiritual roots that could achieve a perfect balance between multiple spiritual roots was pitifully small. Therefore, the number of people who possessed 2 or 3 origin nuclei in this world was naturally pitifully small. In his previous life, apart from immersing himself in alchemy, Ling Han had immersed himself in cultivation. He rarely fought with others, so it was not surprising that he did not come into contact with martial artists with multiple cores. Moreover, multiple nuclei could also be used as a trump card to turn the tables. Who would easily reveal their trump card? 5 yuan nuclei to form a large yuan nucleus. In other words, my yuan energy will be 5 times stronger than an ordinary person's. Ling Han thought to himself. This was an extremely terrifying thing. If every martial artist attacked with all their might, they would have to attack more than 100 times, or even 1,000 times, before they would be able to use up all the energy in their bodies. But what if they could increase the speed of the energy by 5 times? That means every strike is 5 times more powerful. If the power of the poly stage was to be compared in terms of numbers, if the first layer was 1, then the second layer was 2 and the third layer was 3. However, the fourth layer was 6 and every third layer was a step that separated the front, middle, and back stages. With such a comparison, the advantage of the 5 elemental yuan nuclei was incomparably obvious. No. The 5 elemental yuan nuclei have also formed a perfect balance and mutually amplify each other. The explosive power is not just 5 times but 6 times or even 10 times. If I reach the peak of the first layer of poly, I will at least be comparable to the 4th layer of poly. As for how much, I will only know after I reach the peak of the first layer of poly. So this was the true strength of the immortal spirit root. However, to strengthen 5 yuan nuclei at the same time, the speed would definitely not be as fast as strengthening 1 yuan nucleus. The advantage of the immortal spirit root in cultivating at a fast speed would be reduced by quite a bit. Furthermore, to pour out yuan energy at 5 times the speed required the space in the dantian to be extremely large. Otherwise, the energy would be exhausted after just a few strikes. How would that be possible? There is no advantage in speed. In exchange, I will be practically invincible among those of the same level. Furthermore, I am the Alchemy Emperor, and can still maintain a high speed of cultivation. Even if I still step into the heaven tier in 200 years, this will still be the fastest speed in history. No. I already have a complete comprehension of the realm. I definitely don't need as long as 200 years. The world is fair. To obtain stronger power, one must pay double or even 10 times the price. Furthermore, the space in the dantian is too small now. It doesn't allow me to fight for too long. According to my current understanding, as long as there are multiple spirit roots with completely balanced attributes, they can be called immortal spirit roots. However, immortal spirit roots can also be divided into grades, and my 5 elements Chaos Lotus is the strongest. Because it is impossible for there to be 6 spirit roots in this world, there is no way to achieve balance. No wonder I found the second level of the 5 elements heaven grade skill a little strange. I had thought that the person who created this skill made a mistake. So it is because the 5 elements Chaos Lotus can form the 5 elements origin nuclei. Coupled with the 5 origin nuclei circulating at the same time, there is no problem at all with this skill. As expected, the immortal spirit root must be matched with a specific skill in order to unleash its power. Otherwise, if I use a normal skill to activate the 5 elements origin nuclei, I really don't know what will happen. In this life, I have the best conditions in almost everything. If I still can't shatter the void and become a god, then I should really find a piece of tofu and knock myself to death. While the medicinal effects have not been exhausted, I will cultivate for a while longer. Ling Han guided the remaining medicinal effects of the green spiritual fruit in his body, expanding his dantian and strengthening the origin nuclei. The cultivation process of the poly tier was to expand the dantian and strengthen the origin nuclei as much as possible. The bigger the dantian, the more origin power it could contain. This was accumulation. And the bigger the origin nuclei, the faster it rotated, and the stronger the power it could erupt in an instant. Thus, even if 2 martial artists were of the same tier, there would be a huge difference in battle prowess. Of course now, the number of origin nuclei had to be taken into account. Ling Han was like a digger, opening up his dantian so that it could contain more origin power. At the same time, he pushed the origin nuclei to revolve on its own. With every revolution, the speed would increase by a tiny bit. Threads of origin power twined around the origin nuclei, causing the volume of the origin nuclei to also increase. The process of strengthening the origin nuclei had to be very strict because the 5 origin nuclei had to be in a state of absolute balance. Otherwise, even the slightest difference would cause the origin nuclei to collapse. The more he started, the more he could not afford the slightest difference. The foundation was really too weak. His thirst for powerful strength caused Ling Han to cultivate tirelessly. What? He was in the midst of digging with all his might, but he suddenly stopped, and an expression of disbelief appeared on his face. A black tower was currently floating in his dantian. Its whole body was overflowing with golden light, and it emitted a desolate and primitive aura, ancient and solemn. The tower had 9 levels, and from the perspective of Ling Han's divine sense, this black tower was 30,000 meters tall, connecting the sky and the earth. Even if 10,000 years had passed, Ling Han could still recognize this black tower at a glance. Using his words, even if it was burnt to ashes, he would still recognize it. Because this black tower was the main culprit that killed him in his previous life. Damn it, why was this tower in his dantian? Could it be that killing him once in his previous life wasn't enough? In this life he chased after him again, Intending to trap and kill him a second time? Don't play like this. Chapter 34. In his last life, Ling Han experienced many dangers and entered the Black Light Earth Valley, discovering a mysterious black tower with golden characters engraved with the indestructible Heaven Scroll. This was Ling Han's greatest opportunity in his last life, but also the greatest danger. The black tower shook, and his physical body was directly shaken into ashes, but his soul somehow survived and transmigrated for 10,000 years. Now that he was in this black tower, even with his heaven-tier mentality, he couldn't help but shiver. In his last life, this black tower shook him into ashes with just a light shake, and in this life it appeared in his body. How could this not be scary? However, Ling Han quickly calmed down. If the black tower wanted to kill him a second time, it could have done so long ago. Although he just discovered the black tower existed in his dantian, in reality, this thing should have been there for a long time. And when he thought about it carefully, some puzzles were solved. For example, why could his soul exist for 10,000 years? It must be related to the black tower. Why could he suddenly come back to life? It must also be related to the black tower. But he was reincarnated in a way he didn't know at all, and the black tower itself also came in. Brother, should I thank you or hate you? Ling Han murmured in his heart. His last life ended prematurely because of the black tower, but he asked himself, even if the black tower didn't shake him to death, with only 1,000 years, could he learn the indestructible Heaven Scroll? Completely impossible. Because he didn't eat or sleep, and spent all his time on studying the indestructible Heaven Scroll, which required 10,000 years. Under normal circumstances, how could he do it? Now he even had a feeling that the black tower was actually helping him by shaking him to death, allowing him to comprehend the indestructible Heaven Scroll in a spiritual state. Thus, when he had grasped the first layer of the Heaven Scroll, he had come back to life. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence in the world? The black tower was still there, with a total of 9 floors. Except for a tightly closed door at the bottom, the other floors were all sealed, without a single window or other door. And even with Ling Han's eyesight, he couldn't tell what material it was made of, and could only feel a cold, old and ancient presence. Moreover, Ling Han had never heard that the dantian could contain anything other than origin energy. This is no ordinary object. There was a 99% chance that it had come from the immortal realm, and that was why the indestructible Heaven Scroll was inscribed on it. A cultivation technique that required 10,000 years to comprehend naturally could not possibly have come from the mortal realm. Ling Han wanted to use his consciousness to enter the Black Tower, but discovered that there was no way at all. Arbitrary consciousness was formless, and could be said to be all-pervasive, but this Black Tower really didn't have the slightest gap. He wanted to force his way in, but his consciousness was immediately pushed back when he tried to force his way in. Well, this was a master. In his last life he was killed with a casual shake of the hand, and now he was domineeringly occupying his dantian. And not only was he completely helpless, he didn't even know what kind of existence the Black Tower was. Unwilling to accept this, he launched his consciousness to collide with it again. No matter what, he had to find out. After a few times, over and over again, the Black Tower seemed to be annoyed by him, and actually trembled slightly, reacting and sending out a consciousness. This surpassed language itself, and allowed Ling Han to directly understand. The general idea was that he was too weak now, unable to enter the Black Tower at all, and had to at least cross into Gushing Spring Tier. However, as the new master of the Black Tower, as long as Ling Han advanced a tier, he could obtain a chance to be strengthened by the Black Tower, directly increasing his power by 1 tier. For example, Ling Han was now in the early stage of the first layer of Poly, so with the help of the Black Tower, he could use the power of the first layer of Gushing Spring Tier. But there was only one chance, and if he didn't use it, it would be a waste, unable to accumulate. Master, he actually became the master of the Black Tower. However, this tower was really something. Since he was the master, why couldn't he use it at all? And he could only obtain one chance to be strengthened by the Black Tower at each tier? He had to wait until he broke through to Gushing Spring Tier to understand more. However, this could be used as a trump card, instantly increasing his power by 1 tier, enough to turn the tables on him. However, he could only use it once at each tier, too stingy. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh, and opened his eyes, looking very melancholic. This almost caused Lu Yutong to cry. Say you broke through to element gathering tier in a single day. Yet you still look very disappointed. How can others accept this? Come, let's go home. Ling Han snapped his fingers. This was the first time he had received fatherly love, and now that he had been away from home for almost a month, he still felt a bit homesick. The two of them returned to their residences. On the way back, Ling Han went through the second layer of the 5 elements heaven grade skill in his mind. With his comprehension ability, he naturally had no difficulty understanding every single detail. 5 elements heaven grade skill had a total of 9 layers, corresponding to the 9 tiers from body refining tier to heaven tier. Every time he broke through a tier, he would have to change the corresponding cultivation technique. The poly tier was indeed different. Origin power burst forth from his dantian, at least 10 times that of the 9th layer of body refining tier. It was long and continuous, as if there was no end to it. It took them almost half a day to get there, but the return trip only took an hour. Grey Cloud Town soon appeared in front of the two of them. Greetings, young Master Han. Greetings, young Master Han. After entering the Ling family, all the servants and guards along the way bowed respectfully to him. Now that everyone knew that Ling Han had defeated the Chung family brothers, they naturally didn't dare to be disrespectful to this useless young master of the past. Ling Han asked around, and when he found out that his father was in the study, he immediately ran over with large strides. Ling Dongxing said that as long as he broke through to spirit gathering tier, he would tell him about his mother. He entered his own courtyard and came to the door of the study. The door was unlatched and he coughed lightly, walked in and said, "Father, I'm back." "Haha, you're back just in time. The Chung family is hosting a banquet tonight, and you're also on the invitation." Ling Dongxing immediately let out a hearty laugh, raised his head to look at Ling Han, and handed him an invitation. Ling Han took it, glanced at it, and said with a smile, "The Chung family can't hold on any longer." Ling Dongxing had long begun his counterattack. After Zhu Dajuan cut off the supply of elixirs to the Chung family was like a normal person who had lost a leg, and it was difficult for them to move forward. And the Ling family was also attacking the Chung family's other businesses, purchasing raw materials that were supposed to be sold to the Chung family at a high price, and selling the goods that the Chung family sold at a low price. In this way, the Chung family's finances were completely paralyzed, just like the Ling family some time ago. After more than 20 days, the Chung family was in a great predicament. Now that the Chung family sent out an invitation, it was most likely a signal to beg for mercy. "Later you'll go to the banquet with me, but be careful. Don't run around at the banquet. I'm worried that the Chung family will take the risk out of desperation and set up a killing trap," said Ling Dongxing. He naturally wouldn't take the risk alone, and the family's elites would also go with him to prevent the Chung family from using force. Ling Dongxing looked at Ling Han, his thick brows slightly furrowed. He had a feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what it was. "Pa!" After a while, he suddenly slammed the table and jumped to his feet, his face full of excitement. "Han, you've broken through to the poly realm." He finally realized what was wrong. Ling Han nodded and said with a smile, "I've broken through." Good, good, good." Ling Dongxing was excited, his hands clenched into fists. Because he used too much force, his knuckles cracked and his veins protruded. "Father, I want to know what happened to my mother," said Ling Han in a low voice. Ling Dongxing hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "You're indeed qualified to know now. I thought that I would hide the matter about your mother in my heart for the rest of my life. I've hidden it for too long, and my heart is also very bitter." Ling Han nodded slowly. For so many years, Ling Dongxing had borne the pain of losing his beloved wife alone. There was no one to comfort him, no one to share his burden, so naturally he was miserable. He swore that no matter who broke up his parents, he would make them pay the price. Reading on the mobile phone is more refreshing. Chapter 35. The 7 Wind Mountains were very large, spanning nearly 1,000 miles from east to west, and nearly 400 miles from north to south. It was the largest mountain in the northern region of Rain Country. There were many demonic beasts in the mountains, and spiritual medicine abounded. Sometimes one could also find precious metals here which could be forged into high-level weapons. Thus, there were many people who came here to train and search for treasures, but every year there were also many who died here. Some died in the mouths of demonic beasts, some died because of the dangerous environment, and some were killed by their own kind. Although no one had ever counted, everyone believed that more than half of the people who died were killed by their own kind. Thus, in the Seven Wind Mountains, the most dangerous thing was not the demonic beasts but their own kind. One day later, Ling Han and Lu Yutong arrived at Yellow Bridge Town, which was the closest town to the Seven Wind Mountains. From here they could directly enter the mountains. Because the journey this time was very long, they had come on horseback. The two of them rested for the night in an inn in the town, and left their horses at the inn. Then they brought along their simple belongings and entered the mountains. If they did not return within a month, the inn had the right to sell their horses as the fees for keeping the horses for this month. The morning sun rose and shone on the dewdrops, reflecting beautiful colors and full of vitality. This was a wild, primitive mountain. Although there were many people exploring the mountain every day, but for such a huge mountain range, this number of people was really insignificant. Ling Han and Lu Yutong breathed in the fresh air, feeling an indescribable sense of relaxation. They walked all over the mountain, searching for the cave that the clues had mentioned. However, after 5 days, they had indeed discovered a considerable number of caves, but without exception, they only disappointed Ling Han. True, if this cave could be found so easily, wouldn't it have been discovered long ago? Ling Han suddenly stopped in his tracks. He had heard the sounds of battle. "Let's go," he said. As a person who had lived 2 lives, he could not change his great curiosity. They moved in the direction of the sounds, and very soon, they arrived at the side of a small stream. On the empty ground in front of them, there were currently 2 groups of people engaged in a fierce battle to the death. This world is really small. Ling Han shook his head. He actually recognized one side of the battle. Lu Dong, Chan Pengju, Zhu Shui, and the others. Previously, they had fought for the green spiritual fruit together on Balance Mountain, but after the incident with Hang Zhan, these 5 people had also been scared off. He had never thought that he would meet them here again. Among these 5 people, Lu Dong, Li Hao and Zhu Shui had all broken through to Element Gathering Tier, while Chan Pengju and Zhou Chong had both reached the 9th layer of Body Refining Tier. Their improvement was very obvious. After all, they had all obtained a green spiritual fruit. However, although they had 3 elites of Element Gathering Tier, they were still at a disadvantage because the other side had as many as 4 elites of Element Gathering Tier. 3 against 4, they were already at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, not to mention that they had just broken through, so their battle prowess was even weaker. If it were not for the fact that the other side seemed to have the intention of capturing them alive, they would have long since been finished. "Hurry up and surrender lest you suffer more," one of their opponents said. The other side only had 4 people, and all of them looked fierce and ferocious. It was obvious that they had been here for a long time, and were filled with killing intent. Lu Dong and the other 4 did not answer, and continued to defend with all their might. In the beginning, Li Hao had been the strongest among the 5 of them, and now he was no exception. He brandished his long saber, and every strike of his saber was fearless, exuding an aura of no return. It was only because of his existence that the group of 5 were able to grit their teeth and persevere. However, he was also heavily targeted by 2 of his opponents. Pu Piu with 2 heavy blows, 2 new wounds appeared on his chest and back, and blood splattered everywhere. Li Hao roared loudly, and his eyes became bloodshot. The aura he exuded became more and more violent, as if something was about to burst out from within his body. Ling Han could not help but make a soft sound of surprise. "What is it?" Lu Yutong asked. A battle of this level was naturally not something she would be interested in. "That guy is quite talented, he's about to comprehend Saber Chi," Ling Han said, pointing at Li Hao. Saber Chi. Lu Yutong could not help but be shocked. No matter what kind of chi it was extremely difficult to comprehend, but most powerful warriors would speculate that it would be easier to comprehend under extreme emotions. For example, extreme joy and extreme sorrow, or endless slaughter, or even complete despair. However, she had always been as cold as ice, so she was isolated from extreme emotions like extreme joy and extreme sorrow, and had never managed to form sword chi in the end. According to what she knew, the elder in her clan who had managed to form sword chi had only managed to comprehend sword qi under great sorrow after his wife had passed away from illness. Now that Li Hao was actually about to comprehend saber qi, how could she not be shocked and envious? Ling Han smiled and said, "You don't need to be discouraged. As long as I guide you carefully, you will also be able to form sword qi very soon. This is not something difficult to do." For him, forming sword ray was the difficult part, and grasping sword heart was the real challenge. Not something difficult at all. Lu Yutong almost rolled her eyes again. How many people in the whole of Rain country had managed to form qi? Even their Lu clan only had a mere 7 people. Ling Han only smiled slightly. This girl naturally did not know how big the whole Eastern Star was. The strongest warrior in Rain country could only possibly be in the Flower Blossom tier. It could really only be said to be a remote and desolate place. In the wider world, geniuses were as common as clouds, and those who had grasped ray, or even heart, were not in the minority. "You're not going to help?" Lu Yutong could not help but ask. This is a rare opportunity for that guy. If he is unable to form saber qi this time, then the next time he has a chance to form saber qi might be 5 years, or even 10 years later, Ling Han said, shaking his head. Let him endure some more pressure. Lu Yutong frowned slightly. She was not fond of Li Hao. Under the attacks of the enemy that were like a torrential storm, he could be killed at any moment, what more when he formed saber qi. Don't be a despicable person. Under extreme pressure, you will explode with power that you cannot even imagine, Ling Han said with a smile. He could not help but think back. In his last life he was really a flower in a greenhouse, concocting alchemical pills and taking alchemical pills, easily advancing to the next level. But it was only when he began to search all over the world for ancient ruins that he discovered how poor his control over his own power was. Being surrounded by danger in one ancient ruin after another, it also tempered his tenacious willpower and improved his battle instincts. From that moment onwards he could truly be called a powerful warrior. Shua! A resplendent flash of saber light flashed, and as if to prove Ling Han's words, Li Hao, who had originally been forced into a desperate situation, actually unleashed a saber technique that would cause one to gasp in shock. What was even more shocking was that at the same time as this saber light flashed, another flash of saber light appeared, as if he had unleashed 2 saber strikes at the same time. Not 2 saber strikes, this second flash of saber light was saber qi. Pooh! No one had expected that Li Hao would actually be able to suddenly unleash a flash of saber qi. One of his opponents was instantly hit, and as the saber qi flashed past, blood immediately spurted out from that person's left shoulder. Chapter 36. However, it's not that I'm trying to discourage you, but among the participants of the Dayuan tournament, there's no lack of people in the 9th layer of Poly. You've just entered the Poly tier, so no matter how talented you are, it's impossible for you to be on par with the 9th layer of Poly. Ling Dongxing changed the topic and reminded Ling Han. Having ambition was a good thing, but overconfidence was definitely a bad thing. Ling Han nodded. In martial art, every small tier was a step and the 3rd tier was a large step. Only a few geniuses could cross this large step and surpass their own tier to achieve victory. He was now only in the 1st layer of Poly, and was still far from the 9th layer of Poly. Moreover, there were some people who had already reached the 9th layer of Poly, but had yet to break through to Gushing Spring tier. However, they were able to hone their skills even more, so their battle prowess would naturally increase by another level. If he reached the peak of the 1st layer of Poly with the power of the 5-element origin nuclei, he would have a high chance of winning even against someone in the middle stage of Poly, but against someone in the late stage of Poly, his chance of winning would be 50-50. After a while, I plan to go to the 7 Wind Mountains to train, Ling Han said. Although he had already made this decision a long time ago, he still had to tell Ling Dongxing about it. Ling Dongxing was immediately shocked. He naturally knew what kind of place the 7 Wind Mountains was. It was a world where demonic beasts roamed freely, and there were terrifying existences in the depths of the mountains. Even powerful warriors of spiritual ocean tier did not dare to venture deep into the mountains. Ling Han was only in the 1st layer of Poly, so entering the 7 Wind Mountains was really too dangerous. Moreover, there were only 2 months until the end of the year. Even if he entered the mountains to train, he wouldn't be able to improve much. Don't worry, father. I'll only walk in the outer regions, and won't venture deep into the mountains. Ling Han smiled. He indeed had no such plans, because the martial artist who discovered the earth dragon grass was only in the 9th layer of Pali, so how could he possibly venture deep into the 7-wind mountains? Ling Dongxing was still worried, but he knew that his son had grown up and wouldn't listen to him for everything, so he could only remind him. Fortunately, Ling Han didn't have to leave immediately. The father and son chatted for a while longer before Ling Han returned to his room. He took a good bath and washed off the dust on his body. Then he took out a new set of clothes and changed into them. However, he felt that they were a little tight. He was still growing his hair, and after a month of training in the wilderness, not only had he grown taller, his body had also become much sturdier. Wearing his old clothes, he suddenly felt a size smaller. Fortunately, the Ling family was not short of money. Ling Han called a servant and asked him to take the measurements and then immediately go to the boutique to pick some clothes. However, when it came to Lu Yutong, he couldn't help but stop the servant and asked Lu Yutong to tell him her measurements and bring some clothes for her. Tonight they were going to the banquet. Of course, this beautiful maidservant had to come along. Not too long after, the servants returned with a pile of clothing. There were more than 10 sets of both male and female clothing. Ling Han and Lu Yutong took their time to choose. Ling Han, on the other hand, was able to finish choosing very quickly, but Lu Yutong tried on one after another. It was as if she was not very satisfied with any of them, yet she seemed to be very interested in every single one of them. Only when the sun was about to set did Lu Yutong finally choose one. After changing into it, Ling Han couldn't help but whistle. It was really beautiful. She was a stunning beauty to begin with. Now that she had changed into a lake green dress, her delicate figure was fully displayed. Her round breasts, slender waist, slightly raised buttocks, and 2 long legs, she was full of femininity. She had even specially put on some light makeup, making her facial features even more distinct. She was absolutely mesmerizing. Seeing Ling Han's slightly shocked expression, Lu Yutong couldn't help but feel a little proud. She had always been shocked by Ling Han, and now that she had finally put on the act, she felt extremely happy. The corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up in a smile. She was originally an icy beauty. Now that she had broken through the ice and smiled, she was truly charming and alluring. Even with Ling Han's temperament, his eyes were still a little dazed. Let's go. Lu Yutong slightly raised her jade-white chin, forming an incomparably moving arc. She seemed a little proud. A beauty was a beauty. Her every movement would cause one to feel relaxed and happy. But after leaving, Lu Yutong still covered her face with a veil, hiding her moving features. This caused Ling Han to sigh inwardly in pity. At the same time, he was also a little proud. That was because he was the only one who could appreciate the beauty of a pretty maidservant. Oh right. Do you know if there are any outstanding geniuses in Diyuan City? Ling Han asked as they walked. Lu Yutong's steps paused slightly, and she said, "You want to participate in the Dayuan tournament? You are quite smart." Ling Han smiled. Every 3 years, Rain Country will hold a national tournament. If you can get into the top 50 in the Dayuan tournament, you will be guaranteed admission to Huyang University, Lu Yutong said. This tournament is meant to prepare geniuses for Rain Country in the first place. So that was how it was. This was not an isolated case in Diyuan City. If it's a genius, Lu Yutong thought for a moment, then opened her red lips and said, "The Imperial City is too far away from here, so I am not very sure. I only know of one person because he is also a student of Huyang University." "Who is it?" Ling Han asked casually. "Qi Yongyi, the 4th son of the current Diyuan king. Everyone calls him the Eternal Night King. He is indeed extremely talented, and his battle prowess is extraordinary. When he was in the 6th layer of Pali, he had already killed a powerful warrior in the 8th layer of Pali." Lu Yutong could not hide her admiration. Defeating and killing were 2 different things. 3 years ago, he was in the 6th layer of Pali, and obtained the 2nd place in Diyuan City. Now, he should be in the 9th layer of Pali. This was indeed a strong opponent. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared. Only this kind of opponent would be satisfying to trample on. The 2 of them met up with Ling Dongxing, and the 3 of them boarded the carriage and departed from the Ling family's mansion. Following closely behind them was Ling Chongquan and his grandson, who also boarded the same carriage. "Father, you still haven't dealt with them?" Ling Han asked. Ling Chongquan is, after all, the chief butler. Moreover, he has been in power for many years, so his influence is very deep. Although I have removed some of his influence, it is not something that can be completely dealt with in a short period of time. Ling Dongxing frowned, looking slightly displeased. This pair of grandfather and grandson actually dared to snatch his son's place to enter Huyang University. They were absolutely shameless. Ling Han nodded. In the end, it was still a matter of power. If Ling Dongxing was in Gushing Spring Tier, Ling Chongquan would not dare to have the slightest bit of disloyalty even if he had 100 guts. The carriage swayed, and after about 20 minutes, they arrived in front of the Chung family's mansion. The Chung family was another great clan in Grey Cloud Town, so their mansion was naturally not something that a normal clan could compare to. It occupied an area of several tens of acres, and the tall walls stood tall, like a giant beast crawling on the ground. Because the Ling family was not the only one who had been invited today, but all the clans with a bit of power in the town had received the invitation. The Chung family had already laid out a red carpet at the main entrance. 8 servants stood on both sides of the entrance, and when a guest arrived, they would shout loudly, and there would naturally be someone from within the mansion to welcome them. When Ling Han and his companions alighted from the carriage, one of the servants immediately shouted, "The esteemed guest has arrived." "Haha, Brother Ling, I've been waiting for you for a long time." A middle-aged man came out to welcome them, and raised his hands in greeting towards Ling Dongxing. His face was as red as a date, and his figure was tall and sturdy. He was the head of the Chung family, Chung Wenkuan. Chapter 37. Brother Chung. Ling Dongxing immediately greeted his opponent with a smile, cupping his hands in greeting. Come. You're the main guest today. I was worried that you wouldn't come." Chung Wenkuan held Ling Dongxing's hand, looking very enthusiastic. "Your brother Cheng's treating, how can I not give you face?" Ling Dongxing laughed loudly. The two of them spoke one after another, like a pair of old friends who had known each other for many years. Those who did not know the ins and outs of the situation would definitely not think that they were a pair of sworn enemies, and that each clan would want nothing more than to destroy the other. Ling Han shrugged. He hated this kind of hypocritical politeness the most. Fortunately, he was a genius in alchemy in his last life, so there were only others who flattered him, and he did not need to deliberately curry favor with others. Chung Wenkuan did not even look at Ling Han, as if he did not know that this was the person who had injured his 2 sons, and the main culprit behind the economic war between the 2 clans. "Han'er, don't go too far," Ling Dongxing instructed. "Yes, father," Ling Han replied, and followed behind with Lu Yutong. Under Chung Wenkuan's guidance, they very quickly arrived at the main hall. There were over 100 tables set up here, and there were already quite a number of people seated. Because every table had a name written on it, there would not be a case of sitting at the wrong table. The person who had set up the table was very meticulous, taking into account the fact that there would be female companions. Thus, even though every table could seat 10 people, they would usually only write 5 names. After Ling Han and Lu Yutong found their seats, they sat down. "Young Master Han." There were currently 3 people seated at this table, and they all spoke to Ling Han with respectful expressions on their faces. They were all young people, and also students of Tsangyun College. Not long ago, they had witnessed Ling Han display his invincible might and defeat Brother Chang Xiang. They also heard that he was at the 7th layer of body refining tier, so they naturally did not dare to underestimate him. A 16-year-old at the 7th layer of body refining tier in Grey Cloud Town, he could already be considered a genius. Ling Han smiled at the 5 of them. Since they gave him face, he naturally didn't need to give them the cold shoulder. Not long after, they saw that Ling Muyun had also sat down at this table. However, it was as if he did not notice Ling Han, and his expression was very serious. After a while, Chang Xiang walked over and sat at the same table. "Ling Han, you look good." Chang Xiang sneered at Ling Han. Ling Han glanced at him and said, "The wound on your face healed very quickly." Chang Xiang's face immediately turned red. Being defeated by Ling Han in public was a great humiliation to him, and he was even forced to beg for mercy. Every time he thought about it, he wanted to commit suicide. However, after today, he would completely erase this humiliation. You can only be smug for a while now, he sneered. Later, you will kneel in front of me and beg for my forgiveness. Did you not take your medicine? Or did you take too much? Ling Han said with a smile. Chang Xiang didn't say anything else, but the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he put on an unfathomable expression. More and more people came. At first, everyone was still walking around. This kind of gathering was also a good opportunity to build relationships and do business. However, as the number of people increased, everyone began to sit down and wait for the banquet to begin. The grudge between the Chang and Ling families was seen by everyone. These were the two strongest forces in Grey Cloud Town, and if the Chang family were to lower their heads to Ling Han now, then the Ling family would be the sole ruler in the future. Because of this, there were so many people present today, and they all wanted to witness it with their own eyes. Very quickly, Chang Wenkuan stood up and gestured to the people around him, indicating that he had something to say. The people who were originally just whispering also stopped talking, and the hall became incomparably quiet. Was he going to admit defeat to the Ling family in front of everyone? Today, I have invited everyone here to introduce a person to everyone. Chang Wenkuan opened his mouth and said. As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned. What was going on? Shouldn't the Chang family be admitting defeat? Why did it become a welcoming banquet for someone? If they had known earlier that this would happen, the majority of people would not have come to this banquet. Shua, everyone's gazes all turned to Ling Dongxing. Now that the Chang family had made such a move, the next person to bear the brunt of it was naturally the head of the Ling family, and they wanted to see how he would react. However, to everyone's disappointment, Ling Dongxing still had a faint smile on his face, as if he didn't care about it at all. Chang Wenkuan continued to say, "This person is my nephew, Chang Xiaoyuan. When he was 13 years old, he left the family and became the disciple of an elder of the Stone Wolf sect. Now that he has made some small achievements in his martial arts, he is able to return home to visit his family." Stone Wolf sect, everyone was shocked. The Stone Wolf sect was the overlord of the area within a radius of 1,000 miles, and controlled the life and death of Grey Cloud Town and several dozen other towns. It could be said that they were the local tyrant. Chang Wenkuan suddenly playing this card obviously meant that he did not plan to admit defeat to the Ling family, but wanted to use the Stone Wolf sect to suppress the Ling family. However, Chang Xiaoyuan was only the disciple of an elder of the Stone Wolf sect, so his power should be limited, right? This time, Xiaoyuan has returned, and was fortunate enough to invite an esteemed guest. Chang Wenkuan was all smiles. This was his trump card. Let us invite Elder Chan Feng Lai. Elder. The elder of the Stone Wolf sect. That was a being of gushing spring tear. Chang Wenkuan was the first to applaud, and under his lead the others also began to applaud. At this moment, an old man walked out from the inner door of the hall. He had a medium build, was dressed in cinnabar, and had a full head of black hair. His skin was ruddy, and there was a bewitching glow about him. Behind the old man, a young man walked out. His hands were at his sides and his brows were low. He followed closely behind the old man, appearing very respectful. Needless to say, this old man was definitely Chun Fenglai, and this young man was Chang Xiaoyuan. Chun Fenglai strode to the main table, and sat down as if there was no one else present, appearing extremely arrogant. However, no one dared to express any dissatisfaction towards his attitude, because he was a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring Tier. Even if he was only in the first layer of Gushing Spring Tier, he would still be able to crush the 9th layer of Pali. This was the iron law of martial art. He did not make a sound from the beginning to the end. In his eyes, this was a matter of course. There was not a single person here that was worthy of him speaking to. If it was not for the fact that Chang Xiaoyuan had begged him for many days, he would definitely not lower himself to come here. Chang Wenkuan gave Ling Dongxing a smug look, meaning to say, "I've already invited an elder of the Stone Wolf sect, and you still dare to oppose me?" Chang Xiaoyuan did not accompany Chun Fenglai to sit at the main table, but instead walked to sit next to Chang Xiang, looking very imposing and imposing. This guy was in Pali Tier, and should have broken through not too long ago. Now, he was still in the first layer of Pali Tier. "Younger brother Xiang, I heard that you sparred with someone a few days ago and lost." Chang Xiaoyuan said to Chang Xiang. My skills were inferior, AI. Chang Xiang deliberately sighed. Oh. Chang Xiaoyuan raised an eyebrow and said, who did you lose to? I'd really like to see for myself. He as far away as the horizon, the one right before your eyes. Chang Xiang turned his gaze towards Ling Han. So it's this handsome young man? Chang Xiaoyuan smiled coldly, and also walked towards Ling Han, provoking him. Do you dare to spar with me? Chapter 38. This pair of cousins, one blocking the other, one asking and one answering. Everyone could tell that they were deliberately provoking Ling Han. Chang Xiang's lips curled up slightly, and he said proudly, I forgot to mention this cousin of mine broke through to the Poly realm last year, and is now about to reach the peak of the first level of the Poly realm. He can be said to be an unparalleled genius. Chang Xiaoyuan smiled modestly and said, I only broke through to the Poly realm when I was 20, so I can't be considered an unparalleled genius. I'm just a step ahead of everyone else. Hearing his words, everyone else at the table looked shocked. Poly realm. Even though Chang Xiang was already at the 9th level of body refining tier and was only 19 years old, to take this step would take at least 3 years, at most 5 years, or even a lifetime. Therefore, Chang Xiaoyuan's modesty was a bit over the top. To break through to the Poly realm at 20 years old, one could definitely be called a genius. Of course, unparalleled genius was a bit over the top, but Grey Cloud Town was too small after all, and anyone who stood out a little could be called a genius. In the general knowledge of martial art, when one crossed a large realm, that was an absolutely insurmountable gap. Everyone looked at Ling Han, wondering how this guy was going to resolve the predicament before him. If he accepted the challenge, he would definitely lose, and Chang Xiaoyuan might even kill him. With an elder of Stone Wolf sect overseeing things, what would he be afraid of? But if he did not accept, the reputation he had painstakingly built up would come crashing down. This was a difficult decision, but just by comparing the two options, he should know that choosing to avoid the challenge was the wisest choice. After all, accepting the challenge could very well cost him his life. He wanted to slap himself in the face. Ling Han glanced at Chang Xiang, then shifted his gaze to Chang Xiaoyuan, and the corners of his lips curled up involuntarily into a smile. This was a good plan, but the Chung family would never have imagined that he had already advanced to the Poly realm, and his 5 elements origin nucleus was even more powerful. Alright, then let's spar, he said with a smile. What? Ling Han actually agreed. Not to mention the others, even Chang Xiang and his brother were shocked. But after a while they revealed cold smiles. Since this brat wanted to court death, they would fulfill his wish. If Ling Dongxing couldn't help but attack, then Chan Fenglai would definitely kill him. This was also what they hoped for. Today's plot was to kill with a borrowed knife. Even Ling Muyun could not hide the joy on his face. He also wished that Ling Han would die. It was very common for martial art aristocratic families to spar at banquets. As long as the area outside the living room was removed, there would be space for them to spar. Under Chang Xiang's intentional promotion, the news that Ling Han was going to spar with Chang Xiaoyuan spread to every table. The strength of the two, or at least Chang Xiaoyuan's strength, was also known to everyone. This was a battle without any suspense. Could it be that Ling Han was too proud and arrogant to accept the challenge? The two came to the patio outside the living room. There was an empty space with a radius of 10 meters. Although it was not very spacious, it was enough for a fight. You really are an idiot, Chang Xiaoyuan sneered and began to overflow with killing intent. He lowered his voice and said, I will kill you. Oh, Ling Han snorted. You really know how to daydream. Then die. Chang Xiaoyuan laughed loudly. He raised his fist and threw a punch at Ling Han. He did not need to use any martial arts techniques. He believed that with his strength at the peak of the first layer of Poly, he would be able to crush Ling Han. There was a saying in martial art that one could defeat 10. When the difference in strength was too great, there was no need for any techniques at all. Ling Han was fearless. He also threw a punch at Chang Xiao. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the two fists collided, and a ripple of energy suddenly erupted, shooting out in all directions. Bang 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 bang. The people nearby immediately fell down. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Chang Xiaoyuan still maintained their previous posture, their fists against each other. What? Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Some people who were eating immediately spat out their food, splattering it all over the face of the person opposite them. For a moment the scene was extremely chaotic. Ling Han had actually exchanged a punch with Cheng Xiaoyuan, and it seemed to be a draw. How was this possible? The arrogance on Cheng Xiaoyuan's face had completely disappeared. He frowned and said, "Poly stage." Ling Han smiled and said, "You're not the only one who can break through." In reality, everyone had already guessed this, but when they heard Ling Han's confirmation, there was a new wave of exclamations. Previously, Cheng Xiaoyuan had broken through to the poly stage at the age of 20. He was already known as an exceptional genius. But now, Ling Han was only 16 years old. A 16-year-old poly stage. Heavens, this was crazy. Everyone looked at Ling Han with disbelief in their eyes. This guy had still been publicly acknowledged as trash more than a month ago, so how had he suddenly made such a great comeback? "Brother Ling, you've really raised a good son," Chang Wenkuan said darkly, his tone filled with killing intent that could not be concealed. A 16-year-old poly stage. This was really too terrifying. He was even more talented than Ling Dongxing had been all those years ago. At that time he had always compared himself to Ling Dongxing, but no matter how hard he tried, the gap between him and Ling Dongxing only grew bigger and bigger. Until Ling Dongxing returned to Grey Cloud Town, his ability remained fixed at the 9th layer of poly, giving him a chance to catch up. But he had never thought that Ling Han's talent was even more outstanding. This brat definitely could not be left alive. Otherwise, in a few years' time this brat might be in Gushing Spring tier. At that time the Cheng family could only bow down to the Ling family. Meanwhile, Ling Dongxing smiled faintly. In the past, his son had caused him to worry endlessly, but now there was only pride. He said, "It's just a so-so. I still can't compare to your Xiaoyuan, who broke through a year ago. Damn, one broke through at 16 years old, and the other broke through at 20 years old. How could they compare like this?" On the field, Cheng Xiaoyuan took a deep breath. He was extremely shocked in his heart. He had heard from Chang Xiang that Ling Han was only in the 7th layer of body refining tier a month ago, but now he had shockingly broken through to the poly stage. This speed was really terrifying. Could it be that this brat had some kind of treasure on him that could increase the speed of his cultivation? When he thought of this, his eyes instantly lit up. That's right, this brat's reputation as a trash was well known, but he had suddenly become so fierce. He must have obtained a great opportunity. Now he's mine, Cheng Xiaoyuan thought. He flipped his hands and opened his fists into palms. He was going to use a martial arts technique. Earth-shaking palm. A yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique. This was something he had gained from his training in an ancient site. Not only did it allow him to obtain a powerful secret technique, after he had handed it over to the Stone Wolf sect, he had also been rewarded with a poly pill, which helped him break through to the poly stage in one go. Otherwise, he would definitely not have been able to break through to the poly stage at the age of 20. He was filled with confidence. Yellow-grade high-level martial arts techniques were the best of the best in the Stone Wolf sect. The martial arts techniques passed down from the ancestors of the Ling family, and the Cheng family were only yellow-grade middle-level martial arts techniques. Once he used the earth-shaking palm, he would still be able to easily control the situation. Chapter 39. Ling Han looked delighted. This stalk of earth dragon grass was more than 200 years old, and not only could it be used as medicine, it could also increase the effects of concocting pills. Then, even if the age of the other main ingredients was slightly lacking, it would still be able to make up for it. He carefully dug out the earth dragon grass. As long as the roots were not damaged, the medicinal effects of the earth dragon grass would not be lost, and could be preserved for a very, very long time. Congratulations, you're one step closer to Uncle's recovery, Lu Yutong said. She now knew that Ling Dongxing's spirit base had been destroyed. Ling Han's face was also filled with joy. If things could continue to go smoothly like this, then perhaps within 1 or 2 years, he would be able to restore Ling Dongxing's spirit base and once again set foot on the path of cultivation. The two of them exited the cave, and Ling Han prepared to concoct alchemical pills, while Lu Dong and the others began to boil the bones of the red-scaled dragon snake. Aside from the inner core, This was the most valuable part of the red-scaled dragon snake. It can't be, this guy can actually concoct alchemical pills. When Ling Han took out a tiny alchemy furnace, Lu Dong and the others' faces all twitched. What a freak. That's right. Not only has his cultivation advanced so quickly, he has also formed 4 flashes of sword chi, and now he can even concoct alchemical pills. I really don't know what to say anymore. Forget it, I won't compare myself to a freak. No. The 5 of them shook their heads repeatedly. Even Li Hao, who had formed 1 flash of saber chi, shook his head like a rattledrum. Wasn't comparing himself to a freak the same as asking for abuse? Ling Han's alchemy techniques were practically dazzling to the eyes. His origin power was now abundant, so there was no longer a need for him to take alchemical pills while he was concocting pills. Moreover, the explosive effects of the 5-element origin nuclei were astonishing, which allowed him to control the temperature of the furnace even more smoothly. After a mere hour he stopped. The transcending origin pill was formed. There were a total of 13 pills. These are transcending origin pills. Each pill can increase one's cultivation level by 1 layer, Ling Han said. He took out 8 pills, and handed the remaining 5 to Lu Dong and the others. In theory, he only needed 2 pills to reach the peak period of the 3rd layer of element gathering tier, but the effects of these transcending origin pills were targeted at single nuclei. Who knew if the 5-element origin nuclei would need double or even more? Thus, he kept an extra 6 pills just in case. Lu Dong and the others naturally had no objections to Ling Han's decision to take the majority of the pills. What a joke. What effort had they put in? All they had done was capture a bright wool sheep. And who would not be willing to do such a thing? They knew that Ling Han had given each of them a transcending origin pill because they had pointed out the location of the cave. This was Ling Han returning the favor. Otherwise, they did not have a very deep friendship, so who would be so generous? 1 pill could increase one's cultivation level by 1 layer. If they were to sell this, what kind of astronomical price would they fetch? Ling Han, Lu Dong, Li Hao, and Zhu Shui immediately took the transcending origin pills and began to refine them. Lu Yutong was responsible for standing guard, while Chan Pengju and Zhou Chong could only watch on enviously from one side. Thankfully, the transcending origin pill could not fly away, so they could still take it when they advanced into element gathering tier. Ling Han sat down in a patch of grass on one side. After taking the transcending origin pill, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth began to surge towards him. His 5 elements chaos lotus swayed slightly and began to madly absorb the surrounding spiritual chi. His cultivation level immediately began to soar. He had already reached the peak period of the 1st layer of element gathering tier in the first place, and under the infusion of a vast amount of spiritual chi, he immediately began to condense his 2nd origin nucleus. 5 dots of light appeared from nothing, and slowly turned into 5 spinning nuclei. Then they spun faster and faster, rapidly growing stronger. And in this process, the space within his dantian was also expanding to accommodate even more origin power. The size of a martial artist's dantian determined how much origin power a martial artist could accumulate. This was equally important, and for Ling Han the importance of this was multiplied by a few times. That was because he had 5 elements origin nuclei, and possessed power that far surpassed his cultivation level. However, the consumption of origin power was naturally ridiculously high as well. He needed a space within his dantian that was many times larger than that of martial artists of the same cultivation level. Otherwise, he would only be able to display his prowess for a short while, and would very quickly be exhausted. Of course, as long as he could obtain 1st place in the Dayuan tournament and obtain the dark moon grass, he would be able to concoct the spatial pill. That was something that even powerful warriors of heaven tier would covet. For him, who was still in element gathering tier, how many times would he be able to expand his dantian? The problem of not having enough origin power was naturally solved smoothly. The might of an immortal grade spirit base was on full display. The spiritual chi that was attracted to him by the 5 elements chaos lotus was indescribably abundant, and the transcending origin pill directly boosted the growth of his origin nucleus, causing his cultivation level to skyrocket. 2nd layer of element gathering tier, early stage, middle stage, late stage, peak stage. His speed was so fast that it was hair-raising. Although his origin nucleus was equivalent to 5 times that of an ordinary person, It did not consume any more of the medicinal effects of the spiritual qi. Although his origin nucleus was equivalent to 5 times that of an ordinary person, he still had an immortal-grade spirit base, so how fast would the rate at which he absorbed spiritual qi be? In the first place, immortal-grade spirit base was synonymous with fast cultivation speed, so how could it possibly be a hindrance? At this time, the medicinal effects of the first transcending origin pill had also been completely exhausted. Ling Han opened his eyes, and instantly felt a strong sense of hunger. As it turned out, he had unknowingly cultivated for an entire day and night. On the other side, Lu Dong and the other two had also finished their cultivation, and expressions of wild joy appeared on their faces. However, the speed at which they had advanced was different. Lu Dong and Zhu Shui had only reached the peak stage of the first layer of spirit gathering tier, while Li Hao had reached the early stage of the second layer of element gathering tier. Their different levels of talent meant that the effects of the medicinal effects they absorbed would also be different. Ling Han, on the other hand, was a little fond of Li Hao. Being able to form saber qi at such a young age was already a testament to his potential, and reality had proven that he was right. Thus, Ling Han decided to nurture this person a little. Perhaps, in the future, a saber king would appear because of this. At this time, the bone marrow of the red-scaled dragon snake had also been boiled and melted into the broth. It was a golden color, and when one smelled it, there was a strange fragrance. It's a perfect tonic. Come, 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 let's all eat to our heart's content. Ling Han called out to the others and began to distribute the broth. The snake meat had also been roasted. Although its effects were far from being comparable to the bone marrow, it would at least be able to fill one's stomach. The 7 of them began to eat, and none of them held back. Putting aside the fact that the red-scaled dragon snake's grade was not high, king-tier demonic beasts were not common goods that could be found on the streets. Even Lu Yutong had only eaten one twice before. Even she, the daughter of a noble family, was like this, so there was no need to even mention Lu Dong and the others. Not long after, they had finished the whole pot of broth. They felt so full and bloated, as if they were about to explode. This was natural. The bone marrow of the red-scaled dragon snake was equivalent to a great tonic, and they had eaten too much of it. The 7 of them hurriedly sat down to meditate, and began to refine this great tonic. This could not increase their cultivation level, but it could strengthen their physique, which was similarly a great benefit. Ling Han circulated the indestructible heaven scroll, and absorbed these medicinal effects into every part of his body. There was actually a golden light flickering on his body, but it was very faint, and if one did not pay attention, they would not be able to notice it at all. Too good, he thought. The indestructible heaven scroll could perfectly absorb these benefits, and not a single bit of it would be wasted. One had to know that the food that one had eaten would definitely not be completely absorbed by the body, especially this kind of great tonic. Because the medicinal effects were too strong, it was definitely not something that could be refined in a short period of time. However, after 1 or 2 days, it would naturally be expelled from the body along with the 5 grains. What a waste that would be! After I've completely refined it, I will definitely be able to cultivate the body of dead tree. Chapter 40. First, he killed a disciple of Stone Wolf Sect, and then threatened Chen Fenglai. What audacity! Stone Wolf Sect was the ruler of 1,000 miles around. In comparison, neither the Ling family nor the Cheng family were qualified to be mentioned in the same breath. Was Ling Han seeking his own death? Chen Fenglai was also startled, because he was shocked by Ling Han's gaze. It was as deep as the ocean and filled with majesty, like a supreme warrior. But he immediately realized that he was actually threatened by a little poly-tier martial artist. He couldn't help but laugh out of extreme anger, and said darkly, "Oh, how do you plan to kill me? I don't need to do anything. In less than 5 days you'll die by yourself," Ling Han said calmly, and stretched out a finger. "About 10 days ago. Did something go wrong while you were cultivating?" Chen Fenglai's expression instantly changed. Just as Ling Han said, 10 days ago, when he was cultivating, he suddenly had an epiphany and planned to break through to the 4th layer of Gushing Spring Tier. But in the end, he didn't succeed. Instead, his origin power went through his meridians. Thankfully, he stopped in time and didn't cause too much damage. How did this brat know? Ling Han smiled and said, Stretch out your hand and press 3 inches below your left ribs. Chun Fenglai's first reaction was naturally that it was absurd, but his hand moved involuntarily and pressed 3 inches below his left ribs. With a light press, his expression instantly changed again. Pain that pierced deep into his bones. And the 7th spine half an inch to the right, Ling Han continued. Chun Fenglai touched it again, and cold sweat involuntarily broke out on his forehead. This was definitely not normal. You've gone mad. You think you're fine because you're still in the midst of going mad, Ling Han said, and then revealed a confident smile. I can save you. Chun Fenglai gritted his teeth and said, fine, teach me the method to cure it, and I'll forgive your crime this time. Elder Chun. Cheng Wenkuan was both shocked and angry. Wouldn't Cheng Xiaoyuan's death be in vain then? Chun Fenglai glared at him, his eyes filled with killing intent. How could a minor character like Cheng Xiaoyuan compare to his life? Cheng Wenkuan hurriedly shut his mouth, cold sweat beading on his forehead. If he talked back to a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear, he would die without knowing why. Ling Han, however, shook his head and said, you are, after all, in gushing spring tear. Your life is only worth so little. Chun Fenglai's heart was filled with anger. But now that his life was in someone else's hands, he couldn't be unyielding. He could only suppress his anger and say, then what do you want? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, that will depend on your performance. Chun Fenglai was extremely gloomy. He was the 9th elder of Stone Wolf sect, a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear. Usually, he was the one who was high and mighty, so when had he ever been manipulated by a mere warrior of poly tear? But who let his life be in the hands of Ling Han? Ever since Ling Han had accurately pointed out the days when his practice had gone awry, and the sharp pain in the 2 acupoints, he had already firmly believed Ling Han's words. What instructions do you have, young Master Han? He lowered his stance. Who? Hearing the 2 words young Master Han, everyone spluttered. That was an elder of Stone Wolf sect, a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear. And he actually addressed Ling Han as young Master Han. How could they not be shocked? Ling Han smiled slightly and said, are you planning to kill me after you found the solution? How could that be possible? Chun Fenglai hurriedly laughed dryly, but cold sweat once again flowed down his face. Ling Han's heart was clear. He naturally wouldn't put himself in danger. He would treat Chun Fenglai, but he definitely wouldn't cure him in one go. He pointed at Cheng Wenkuan and said, this person is an eyesore, beat him up. Cheng Wenkuan's face instantly turned green. He had invited Chun Fenglai over to back him up, to resolve the pressure that Ling Dongxing had been pressing on him these days, causing the Cheng family's funds to be unable to keep up, and they were now in a desperate situation. But he had never imagined that the reinforcement he had invited would actually become the Ling family's helper. How could he not feel aggrieved? If he was given a piece of tofu now, he would definitely bang his head against the wall and die. Senior Chun, he said in a trembling voice, in front of a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear. His cultivation level of the 9th layer of poly tear was completely insufficient. And do you still want to resist? Chun Fenglai said coldly. Anyways, Cheng Wenkuan had nothing to do with him, so he naturally wouldn't take it to heart if he gave this guy a beating. Previously, he had already lowered his head to Ling Han, and now he would throw away his old face. Cheng Wenkuan's expression changed again and again. Finally, he could only grit his teeth and say, I dare not. If he resisted, he would definitely die. Didn't he see that Chun Fenglai was in a very bad mood? Papa! Chun Fenglai's hand rose and fell, giving Cheng Wenkuan 2 slaps on the face. The force he used was so great that blood appeared at the corner of Cheng Wenkuan's mouth. In the main hall, it was completely silent, and only the sound of heavy breathing could be heard. Who would have thought that things would develop in this way? Even Ling Dongxing didn't think that his son would be so capable, toying with a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear in the palm of his hand. This made him both shocked and comforted him. He had a good son. The faces of Cheng Xiang and his brother twitched, wishing that there was a hole in the ground for them to crawl into. Previously, they were still full of confidence and complacency, thinking that they could regain all the face they had lost. They never thought that even their old man would be slapped in the face now. Today's banquet could practically be recorded in the history of Cheng family's humiliation. Chang Wenkuan swallowed his anger, and did not even dare to show any anger on his face. However, no matter how shrewd he was, it was impossible for him to remain calm and composed. The veins on his forehead bulged, and it was obvious that he was extremely furious. Ling family! Ling family! I swear, I will definitely eradicate you all. He roared furiously in his heart. As long as third uncle successfully breaks through to gushing spring tear, everything can be reversed. Ling Han nodded and said to Chen Fenglai, I'll give you a prescription that can temporarily suppress your injuries. You'll be fine for half a year. Though Chen Fenglai was unwilling, he knew that Ling Han would definitely not be able to cure him in one go. If it were him, he would also hold back. After all, he was the weaker party. He could only nod and say, Thank you, young Master Han. Now that things had escalated to this point, the banquet naturally came to an end. If they continued to sit, it would be awkward. Everyone bid their farewells and left. After Ling Han handed the prescription to Chen Fenglai, he, Ling Dongxing and Lu Yutong, left the Cheng family. Ha 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 ha. On the carriage, Ling Dongxing finally released the laughter he had been holding in for a long time. He waved his fist forcefully and said, I've been fighting with Chang Wenkuan for half my life, and I've never felt so relieved as I did today. However, this matter was really dangerous. If Chen Fenglai had not made a mistake in his cultivation, today's matter would not have ended so easily. After all, a disciple of the Stone Wolf sect had died. Ling Han smiled. If Chen Fenglai had not made a mistake, he would have had two other choices. The first was naturally very simple, and he would not kill Chang Xiaoyuan. The second was still to kill him, but he would need to reveal Lu Yutong's identity to suppress the situation. However, there was no need to consider this now. In another month, the Cheng family will not even be able to pay the monthly salary of their guards. At that time, my Ling family will be the sole ruler of Grey Cloud Town, Ling Dongxing said with great pride. Chapter 41. After the incident with the Cheng family, the two families that were originally at the same level in Grey Cloud Town immediately headed towards different fates. The Ling family's reputation was growing day by day, and they already had the status of the #1 wealthy family in Grey Cloud Town. On the other hand, the Cheng family's buttocks were on fire, and they were facing a great predicament. Not only did they not have enough cash flow, but more importantly, their morale had been completely suppressed. Ling Dongxing had a good son. This was the common understanding of everyone in Grey Cloud Town. No one would remember that just 2 months ago, this good son was still publicly known as trash and a laughing stock. The small families in the town all had frequent dealings with the Ling family. They wanted to become in-laws with the Ling family, and their target was, of course, the once great trash but the current great genius Ling Han. Of course, the Shen family had become a laughing stock. They originally already had a good son-in-law, Ling Han, but they themselves had rejected him. He wondered how Shenzian was feeling right now. Just as Chen Fenglai had left, another person from the Stone Wolf sect arrived. His name was Ma Lang. He brought along the Stone Wolf sect's law enforcement team, and they came in a threatening manner. They went from house to investigate, as if they were looking for someone. When Ling Han found out about this, his heart skipped a beat. Could it be that these people were here for Hang Zhan? Very soon, Ma Lang brought his men to the Ling family. The Stone Wolf sect was the ruler of a 1,000-mile radius. This time Ma Lang was representing the Stone Wolf sect, so everyone had to give him face. Thus, all the important figures of the Ling family came to the main hall to receive this special envoy. Ling Han came late, and when he arrived at the main hall with Lu Yutong, it was already filled with people. He shook his head at the servant who was about to greet him, and quietly walked over. There was only one person in the hall who did not belong to the Ling family. He was a young man dressed in white, and he looked about 23 or 24 years old. His looks were average, but his whole body was emitting a powerful aura, and his face was brimming with confidence. If there was any flaw, it would be that the smile on this guy's face was too fake. It made people feel nauseous. Other than that, there was a row of black-clothed men standing outside the main hall. All of them had a cultivation base of the Pali realm, but their realms were not high. They were all in the 2nd or 3rd layer. None of them had advanced into the 4th layer. The 4th and 7th levels were always a threshold. This white-robed young man should be Ma Lang, Ling Han thought in his heart. He shifted his gaze back to Ma Lang. This person's cultivation was much higher, having reached the 6th level of Pali. In this region, coupled with his age, he could definitely be considered a genius. He was miles ahead of people like Shenxian and Changxiang. Head of the Ling family, have any of you entered Mount Tianping in the past month? Ma Lang asked. Ling Dongxing's heart skipped a beat. He naturally knew that Ling Han had just returned from Mount Tianping, but it just so happened that the other party was asking him about it again. How could he not be alarmed? However, he had been the head of the family for many years, so he was naturally shrewd. His expression did not change as he said, as far as I know, no one from the family has entered Mount Tianping. Fortunately, Ling Han's return had been rather secretive. The family only knew that Ling Han had disappeared for about a month, but no one knew exactly where he had gone. Is that so? Ma Lang nodded and did not say anything else. He just sat there with his eyes closed, and no one knew what he was thinking. Ling Dongxing knew what was going on, and hurriedly ordered someone to bring over a wooden box. He said, Young Master Ma has worked hard on your journey. This is a small token from the Han family. It's nothing much, but please accept it, young Master Ma. Only then did Ma Lang open his eyes. After receiving the wooden box, he did not try to avoid suspicion, and actually opened it on the spot. There were only a few thin pieces of paper inside, but when Ma Lang flipped them over, a smile appeared on his face. Those were silver notes, each with a face value of 500 taels. There were 4 of them, which meant that there was a total of 2,000 taels of silver. This was not a small amount of wealth. He had been ordered to move out, and his original intention was to take advantage of the situation. Who would not fear him, because he was now representing Stone Wolf sect. In the past few days, he had already visited all the small families in Grey Cloud Town, and had placed the Ling and Chang clans last. As expected, the rich and powerful were rich and powerful, generous when they went out. Having reaped some benefits, he was naturally in a good mood. He suddenly stood up and said, I am under the orders of the 7th elder to arrest a criminal. If the head of the Ling family knows that someone has entered Balance Mountain in the past month, you must inform me. I will stay in town for a few more days. Definitely. Ling Dongxing agreed. He also stood up and said, I will see you off, young Master Ma. Ma Lang nodded cheerfully, and put on the airs of an imperial envoy. He placed his hands behind his back and walked away. Young Master Ma. Just at this moment someone suddenly spoke up. It was Ling Chongquan. Ma Lang frowned, turned around and asked, What is it? This old man suddenly remembered that someone in the family has disappeared for more than a month. Perhaps he has gone to Balance Mountain, Ling Chongquan said, a cold smile on his face. Oh, who is it? Ma Lang asked. This person is called Ling Han. He is the son of the head of my family. Ling Chongquan had been waiting for the other party to ask, and so he hurriedly answered. Hearing his words, everyone in the Ling family cursed him in their hearts. Not to mention the fact that Ling Han was now the hope of the Ling family and the future pillar of support, even if he was still that good-for-nothing of the past. As long as he had the surname Ling, he could not help an outsider. If he wanted to become the head of the Ling family with such a temperament, then the Ling family would really have no hope. Ling Dongxing was naturally even more furious, secretly regretting that he had not cleaned up the family sooner. On account of the fact that they all had the surname Ling, he had not been ruthless. He had not expected that Ling Chongquan would be so heartless. Ma Lang turned to look at Ling Dongxing and said, Head of the Ling family, is there such a thing? Ling Dongxing's expression did not change as he said, My son did indeed leave the family to gain experience a month ago, but he did not go to Balance Mountain. Oh, then where did he go? Ma Lang's eyes narrowed. 7-Wind Mountain. Ling Han stepped forward. You are Ling Han? Ma Lang turned his gaze to him. I am Ling Han. Ling Han nodded. Ma Lang stared at Ling Han, his expression extremely grim, causing everyone to feel a chill as if a storm was brewing. Ha 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 ha. He suddenly laughed, walked over and patted Ling Han's shoulder saying, Don't be so nervous, I was just casually asking. I still have to go to the Chung family, I will come find you in the future. I think we should be able to chat very well. This young man was really temperamental. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, we will meet again. Head of the Ling family, there is no need to send me off. Ma Lang waved his hand and left with the men in black. Only when his figure had disappeared did everyone in the hall heave a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, their bodies were covered in cold sweat, which was enough to prove the pressure this young man had brought them. Poisonous snake. Yes, he was a poisonous snake. This young man was like a poisonous snake. Even if they were in the same room as him, they would be so nervous that they would break out in cold sweat. Oh. Chapter 42. After leaving the Ling family, Ma Lang muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, that brat is in poly-tier, and he's only 16 years old. A tiny gray cloud town actually managed to produce someone in poly-tier, who's below 20 years old. If he didn't eat some celestial fruit, then he must have obtained some secret treasure. I'll go ask around later. If one wanted to know about a person's affairs, the fastest way was to find out from his enemy, because it was possible that the enemy knew you better than you knew yourself. Ma Lang brought his men to the Chung family, and after half an hour, he returned with a smile on his face, his eyes filled with excitement. 2 months ago, that brat was still publicly acknowledged as trash, but he suddenly exploded. The Ling family released news that the brat was only keeping a low profile in the past, but no matter how low profile he was, how could he be so low profile that his fiancée broke off the engagement? The people of Grey Cloud Town are all blinded by the situation. Obviously, this brat has obtained some kind of nature-defying treasure, which is why his cultivation level has improved so much in such a short period of time. They didn't even consider how could a trash with a 5 elements disarray spirit base suddenly explode and reach poly-tier? Even the 9th elder has been fooled by that brat. Even this kind of trash was able to directly advance from the 2nd layer of body refining tier to poly-tier in a short 2 months. If I obtained it, Ma Lang's heart involuntarily thumped wildly. He was the genius of this generation of Stone Wolf sect, and his master was the 7th elder. At the same time, he was also one of the top 3 disciples of Stone Wolf sect, and the higher-ups of the sect had high hopes for him to break through to Gushing Spring tier in the future. But according to the normal rate of advancement, that would be at least 20 years later. With that treasure, who knows, I might be able to break through to Gushing Spring tier in 3 years or even 1 year. After all, I have an Earth-grade medium-level spirit base, and in terms of talent I'm many times stronger than that trash. However, the Ling family is not weak either, so I cannot act rashly. Otherwise, if I force them into desperation, or even to the point of mutual destruction, I might not be able to obtain that treasure. Furthermore, if I cause too much of a commotion and provoke the experts of the sect, I won't have a share of the treasures. In addition, that kid has a relationship with the 9th elder. Although the 9th elder's status is much lower than master's, if he appears, I can't openly disobey him. That's why I have to keep a low profile. Yes, I have a good relationship with the young poison lord Yu Zheng. This person specializes in using poisons and is known as the Shadowless Poisoner. If I ask him to help, I will definitely be able to easily take down Ling Han. Once I force out the artifact on him, I'll execute him again and say that he's Hang Zhan's murderer. As for the rest of the Ling family, execute them all to prevent the news from leaking out. Get someone to send a letter to Little Poison Lord immediately. I'll pretend to be friends with that kid here, and on the other hand I'll inquire about the origin of that treasure. In less than a month this secret treasure will be mine. After Ma Lang arrived in Grey Cloud Town, he actually refused to leave. Every few days he would visit the Ling family and chat with Ling Han. It was as if they had hit it off at first sight. On the other hand, this guy was insatiably greedy and would always find excuses to ask for benefits from the various small clans. Intimidated by the might of the Stone Wolf sect and intimidated by the law enforcement team that Ma Lang brought with him, he would succeed every time. For close to a month, the various clans in Grey Cloud Town were full of complaints and wished that they could chase this bloodsucker out of the town. However, Ling Han acted as if nothing had happened and cultivated diligently every day. He wanted to reach the peak of the first layer of poly as soon as possible so that he would have the confidence to enter the 7 Wind Mountains to search for the Earth Dragon grass. After a month he had more or less reached the peak of this minor realm. His 5 origin nuclei were already close to their limits, and could no longer increase their rotation speed by even the slightest bit. Otherwise he would immediately vomit blood. However, this rotation speed was still faster than in his previous life because the 5 origin nuclei had reached a kind of equilibrium and had greatly increased their limits. He had also concocted many alchemical pills. Some were medium-grade origin returning pills and some were antidote pills. They were all prepared to deal with the red-scaled dragon snake. The ingredients were taken from Tianyi, and Ling Han had given him some completed pills as payment. This made Zhu Hexian extremely excited because this was the work of a grandmaster and had great research value. My current strength is equivalent to that of an ordinary 5th layer poly, Ling Han said in his heart, and a look of admiration appeared on his face. An immortal grade spirit base was indeed an immortal grade spirit base. In a battle of the same cultivation level, one would naturally have an absolute advantage. There was almost no reason for him to lose. Completing a minor realm in a month is slower than what I had expected in the past. However, it is still faster than that last Yutong. It's just that compared to the body refining tier, the advantage of an immortal grade spirit base has already decreased by a lot. If I combine it with alchemical pills, the speed can be even faster. Ling Han said in his heart. It was just that Grey Cloud Town was too small, and there were very few alchemical pills that could increase the cultivation speed of poly-realm warriors. It was also impossible to obtain the ingredients. Knock knock knock. There was a knock on the door and Lu Yutong pushed it open and entered. She said, Ma Lang is here again. Ling Han revealed a disdainful smile and said, he must think that I have some secret treasure on me to be able to advance my cultivation so quickly. He has been trying to get information from me time and time again. Do you need me to send him away? Lu Yutong asked. She was at the 9th layer of poly and was about to reach the peak of the 9th layer of poly. Dealing with a 4th layer poly was of course a piece of cake. There's no need. His patience seems to be running out. It's time for him to show his cards. Ling Han shook his head. His eyes were bright. Ma Lang was at the peak of the 4th layer poly, so he could use him to test his battle prowess. He and Lu Yutong walked to the main hall and saw that his father, Ling Dongxing, was already seated in the main hall. Ling Chongquan and his grandson were also present. However, they were all standing to one side with sinister smiles on their faces. It was unknown what kind of malicious thoughts they were having. It's time to completely deal with Ling Chongquan's faction, Ling Han thought to himself. However, other than Ma Lang, there was also a black-robed young man in the main hall. His face was completely expressionless, as if he was a living dead. Brother Ling, it's been a few days since we last met. How have you been? Ma Lang stood up and his gaze swept over Lu Yutong's graceful figure, revealing a hint of passion. Such a stunning beauty caused his heart to palpitate. He swore that after he killed Ling Han and obtained the treasures on him, he would definitely get his hands on this beauty. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, thanks to you, I'm doing very well. Ling Dongxing ordered people to serve tea, while Ma Lang enthusiastically invited Ling Han to play at the Stone Wolf sect. Ling Han lifted the teacup and removed the lid. His expression instantly changed. There was poison in the tea. He was an alchemy emperor, and alchemists had a very deep understanding of poisons. This was because some alchemy pills require poisonous ingredients in order to be refined, using poison to fight poison. Pa! He struck out with his palm, and his origin energy vibrated, instantly shattering the teacup that Ling Dongxing had raised to his mouth, causing tea to splatter everywhere. Hana! Ling Dongxing was shocked. He could not understand his son's actions at all. There's poison in the tea, Ling Han said. What? Ling Dongxing's gaze sharpened. His first reaction was not to doubt his son's judgment, but to immediately go over to Ling Chongquan and his grandson. If there was anyone who had the motive and ability to poison the tea, it would definitely be Ling Chongquan. Chapter 43. Ling Han walked to the study table, took out a brush and paper, and immediately began to write on the paper. He wrote very quickly and very soon the brush was finished. He handed the paper to Zhang Weishan. For the sake of Zhu Hexian, he decided to help Zhang Weishan. After all, the old man was always at his beck and call, and had done a lot for him. More importantly, he had even provided him with a clue about the whereabouts of the earth dragon grass. Zhang Weishan took the paper, and his eyes swept over it. Immediately, a pleasantly surprised expression appeared on his face. This was the pill recipe for the reverse pill. It definitely was, because not only were the medicinal ingredients the same as the incomplete pill recipe, the ratio was also the same, and there were 3 additional incomplete medicinal ingredients. Zhang Weishan was extremely excited because in the field of alchemy, it was publicly acknowledged that the reverse pill was a lost pill. Even if he had spent a lot of money to buy the incomplete pill recipe, that incomplete pill recipe had actually already been studied by many alchemists in an attempt to find the complete pill recipe. None of them had succeeded. If he managed to produce the complete pill, his status in the field of alchemy would definitely rise by a large margin. How laughable, how laughable. Previously, he had still been holding on to the incomplete pill recipe, and now he had been slapped in the face, hadn't he? The old man's face turned bright red. Zhu Hexian gave a humph and said, "Old man Zhang, are you happy now?" He was still angry. Hee. Zhang Weishan laughed a little embarrassedly, looking like he treasured the pill recipe very much. Ling Han walked out of the house and said, "I'm leaving." "Many thanks, young friend." Zhang Weishan hurriedly ran over. When he found out that Ling Han was currently staying at the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, he was not in a hurry to mend his relationship with Ling Han. Moreover, he needed some time to get used to it. Ling Han nodded, and after he left the house, he began to walk leisurely. Hey, you're really too much." Qi Zhantai caught up to him, her face full of blame. Ling Han smiled and said, "How am I not much? You're obviously not Grandmaster Zhu's disciple, and you've caused him to be embarrassed." She rebuked. Previously, she had said that she would become Ling Han's senior sister, and protect Ling Han in the future. She had never thought that this guy would be so awesome, actually chasing away Duanmu Changfeng. "I didn't say that either. It's what you think," Ling Han shook his head. "I don't care, you definitely have to compensate me," Qi Zhantai said shamelessly. "Then how do you want me to compensate you?" Ling Han asked. Qi Zhantai tilted her head and thought for a moment, then said, "I haven't thought of anything yet, but I'll owe you for now." "Oh right, are you here to participate in the Dayuan tournament?" "That's right," Ling Han nodded. "Then I'll be kind enough to give you some exclusive insider information," Qi Zhantai said. "This time there are quite a number of elite martial artists here. Needless to say, my 4th brother will definitely be able to obtain first place. Next, there's also Li Dongyu from Stone Wolf Sect. It's said that he's also in the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier, and has even mastered the yellow grade martial arts technique, Little Tianyuan Hands, to the level of great accomplishment. Even my 4th brother has given him a very high evaluation. In the last Dayuan tournament he obtained 5th place. There's also the 3rd son of the Jin clan, Jin Wuji. He's also a very monstrous guy. He's mastered the Jin clan's Golden Sun Palm, and it's said that he also has 2 flashes of Palm Chi. In the last Dayuan tournament he obtained 6th place. Also, let me think. There's a super genius from Fuyang town called Xia Zhongguang. He's only 18 years old this year, and is already in the 8th layer of Element Gathering tier. His battle prowess is also very terrifying. My 4th brother said that he has the ability to enter the top 5. That's right, there's also an amazing guy from Eternal River Town. What's his name again? Louis? No, I think it's Lu Yu or Lu something. He's also only 18 years old, and is in the 8th layer of Element Gathering tier. He also has the ability to enter the top 5. Finally, there's the youngest son of the sect leader of Bailey sect, Bailey Tungyun. I heard that he's only in the 7th layer of Element Gathering tier now, but even my 4th brother said that this guy is amazing. His ability is not inferior to Li Dongyu's. This little girl's 4th brother was Qi Yongyi, who had the title of King of Eternal Night. He was extremely talented and extremely powerful, so much so that even Lu Yutong was full of praise for him. Although Ling Han was confident in himself, he would not be blindly arrogant. However, he had too many trump cards up his sleeves. Throughout the entire Element Gathering tier, he really could not think of anyone who could be a match for him. At least he could not find anyone in this tiny Deyuan city. He nodded and said, "Thank you for your insider information. That's right, fourth brother is going to hold a banquet tomorrow night. You should come as well," Qi Zhantai said. The guests are all those who have the possibility of entering the top 50 in this year's Deyuan tournament. Ling Han could not help but smile, and said, "Your brother is trying to win the hearts of the people. You're the smart one." Qi Zhantai did not deny it. If Qi Yongyi wanted to obtain the position of Deyuan king in the future, he would definitely have to build up his own supporters as early as possible. This position of king was not something that could be obtained just by having great talent and powerful abilities. Rather, one had to have the overall situation. If the entire king's house did not support you, how could you possibly obtain this position? Although fourth brother's talent in martial arts is outstanding, big brother has already painstakingly built up his foundation for over 10 years. Added with the fact that big brother's mother is the daughter of the clan head of the Liu clan, and with the full support of the Liu clan, it is still uncertain who will emerge victorious in the end. This little girl's face was filled with excitement as she clenched her little fists, as if she could not wait for these two brothers to start fighting right now, so that she could enjoy herself to her heart's content. In Deyuan City, aside from the king's house, there were also 4 other great forces that could not be underestimated. They were the Stone Wolf sect, the Hundredly sect, the Jin clan, and the Liu clan. The first prince had the connection to the Liu clan, so he indeed had a considerable advantage in the fight for the position of king. Ling Han only gave it a very casual thought. What did this kind of struggle for the throne have to do with him? Qi Zhantai chattered on endlessly, and only after pestering Ling Han for a long time did she finally let him go. However, the moment she turned around, a crafty smile appeared on her face, and she mumbled, "Fourth brother, oh fourth brother, I have introduced a capable helper to you. You better not screw it up." Ling Han was someone that even Zhu He Xian and Zhang Wei Shan had to address as little friend, so he must have had an astonishing achievement in the field of alchemy. If Qi Yongyi could obtain Ling Han's help, then there would definitely be countless martial artists who would be willing to join him. It was for no other reason than alchemical pills. The cultivation of martial artists could not do without the support of alchemical pills, and if there was a high-level alchemist in one of their forces, then there was naturally no need to elaborate on the attractiveness. How could Ling Han not know what this little girl was planning? However, he did not take it to heart. He indeed wanted to meet that Qi Yongyi and see what kind of genius he was. The next day, Ling Dongxing accompanied Ling Han to register. The Deyuan tournament was only open to martial artists from the same area, and they would need to provide strict proof of identity, because it involved the quota to enter Huyang Academy. There were 36 cities in Rain Country, so naturally it was not possible for all the martial artists in each city to be at the same level. Some were higher, some were lower. As a result, a martial artist who participated in the tournament in a strong city would only be able to place in the top 60, but in a weak city, he would be able to place in the top 40. For the sake of entering Huyang Academy, wouldn't they all run off to participate in the tournament in a weak city? The people of Deyuan City could only participate in the tournament in Deyuan City, and it was impossible for people from other cities to come over. Everyone was guarding their own territory. There were many people registering, and a very long queue had formed. Ling Han was very at ease as he queued up. He had already completely let go of his identity as a heaven-tier warrior from his last life. Everything would start from scratch, starting from a normal person, so what was the big deal about queuing up? After about 2 hours, he was about to reach the end of the queue, and there was only one person left in front of him. But it was at this moment that a young man, surrounded by 4 muscular men dressed in black, forcibly squeezed his way through the queue. The 5 of them arrived at the registration area, and directly cut in front of Ling Han. "Hey, line up at the back." Ling Han frowned and said unhappily. "N." The young man turned his head to look at Ling Han, and could not help but laugh. With an expression filled with disbelief he said, "You actually want me to line up? Do you know who I am?"